the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Vin Curigliano of AAVIM Technology, and I am joined again by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. Now, before I go any further, it has come to my attention that I've been pronouncing Maryland incorrectly for years. It is pronounced, hang on, I'm going to attempt this, Pete. Ready? Mm-hmm. Maryland.
Damn, that was good.
Was that good?
Yeah, but you have a little too much t at the end of it. We don't pronounce our D's and T's properly in the U.S. So
go
Maryland. Yeah, that
Maryland.
Like Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. Well, there you go. Now, mind you, how long we've been doing this show together, Pete? You think you could have? You think you could have gone
better the other way?
Okay, well, I'm going to continue saying Maryland. All right, Maryland.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun place.
Yeah, well, hey, and then
an amusement park.
You have to give me a little bit of a break because, typically the Americans pronounce Melbourne as, go on, Pete.
Oh yeah, Melbourne,
or Brisbane as, go, Pete.
Brisbane. I don't. I'll have you know, I don't, but people do.
Yeah, but Pete, you've been hearing me pronounce Melbourne correctly for the last 3 years, so
Yeah.
So there's that, and I'll before I move on from the pronunciations, I'll just give one more because my wife was listening in on our pre-chat and she was chuckling and she goes, "I've got one for you." I've gone, shoot. She says, aluminium and aluminum. That one kills me.
It's a spelling difference.
I get it.
Aluminum.
All right, I get it. So you guys can't pronounce aluminium, so you change the spelling.
Hey, I'm not the one with the Aussie speech impediment, okay? So, that's...
Hang on. The Aussie? What's an Aussie? It's an Aussie, not an Aussie.
I said Aussie.
Oh, you did say?
Chris, back me up. Did I say that right?
It sounded okay to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, I've got one more before we move on because this one kills me. You ready? When you're soldering wires together and you've got a soldering iron, how do you say solder, Pete?
We pretend the L's not there. It's solder.
Solder. What?
Solder.
Okay.
Yeah, that one makes no sense.
Okay, we're going to move on because waiting patiently in the wings is Chris Mann of Link Audio, also in Melbourne, Australia. Chris, how you doing, man?
Did I say that correctly?
Yes, Melbourne. How you doing, man?
I'm going very well, thank you.
Yes, I know. And look at the ungodly hour that we're having to get up so Pete can actually have his brain half working. So it's about
worth it. Pete's a great guy.
Yes, I know. It's 5:30 in the morning here for everyone listening in, and that's why we don't do video because I'm actually in a dressing gown and a beanie, and let me tell you, it's not a good look. So. There's not going to be any video.
I didn't need that picture in my head, man.
Well, thanks, man. I just did it. And that kind of leads us onto a few things. And now after that, so first off, myself and Pete Brown have been guests on other media. I've been on a podcast. Pete's been on, he's been featured on the NAMM oral history video interviews, which is pretty cool. Pete, you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. Now, I'm one of about a bazillion people that are on there, so I don't want to hype it up as something overly special. But they brought me in there because they're trying to interview people who've done something in the industry, and they knew about my role at Microsoft and being the exec board chair at the MIDI Association. So they just sat me down and had me give the whole history from middle school on up, and then they did a great job editing it down to the stuff that wasn't boring as all hell, and created a nice little here's about me type of video there. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was about 5 minutes, and actually, the person that actually got them to interview, I'll actually put you guys in touch was me because they wanted to interview me. Yep. I've gone, why would you want to interview me? And they're going, oh, seriously, man, very interesting story. And I said, well, I'm not going to be in NAMM, unfortunately. But I said, hey, how about grabbing a hold of Pete? He's got an interesting history and he's, the chair of the MIDI too. And they nabbed you. And So that was interesting, and that was good. It was actually quite good. They did do a good job.
And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, mate, that's fine. And I've been a guest on a podcast that it's called Broken Silicon, and it is the podcast of a YouTube channel called Moore's Law is Dead. Now, this is a YouTube channel that I've been following for a while, and Tom, the host, he releases a whole stack of stuff in regards to leaks with coming technologies, whether it's CPUs and graphics cards and that type of stuff. So I've always tuned into his information, which is kind of cool, and I've actually been reciting some of it over the shows, especially in regards to the W790 Xeon platform, which has finally seen the light of day, and we are going to be covering that in great detail. And that was the primary subject on the show as well, so people can look it up. There's the video. That's a couple of podcasts back. You'll see it. It says something about Sapphire Rapids, a disaster or something. There's a bit of the title's a
little bit of drama.
Yeah, a bit of drama in the title. But I was on that, and the interesting thing for me with that was that I saw how other people actually, prepare and create the content. Look, I got some positives out of it. One, I saw how another platform works, so that if I wanted to actually ever add video, I know where I can actually head. But the preparation and then just the actual running and the actual overall quality, release quality stuff, it's different. So I much prefer being a host to be so I will just leave it at that.
And your editing, like, I don't know if folks realize how much time you spend editing this podcast and cleaning up audio and removing chair squeaks and all that stuff, but you do a really polished job with that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's a radio show for audio professionals, so I'm going to put some effort in there, and there's hardly any as far as content edit. There's not much that hits the floor. Right. I mean, if we have a dropout or something and I've got to cut and shut something, yeah, sure, but I'm not cutting out people in the middle of sentences when they're making a point and stuff. And that was one of the things with the podcast. I was mid-sentence and they faded out to an ad, and I went, what happened?
I watched it, and I don't want to say anything bad about it, but that just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, that was an odd one. And when you say watch, yes, Tom, the host, is seen on video. I'm actually just a logo with some waveform type of stuff going, because I don't.
Because you didn't want to be in your dressing gown.
I didn't want to be in my dressing gown and my beanie. Yeah, there you go. So there you go. I saved the world that visual.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your service, Finn.
Yes. And look, that's got that was a massive reach as far as, views and listens compared to what our podcast gets. And it pre-warned me that, the responses or, the feedback can get quite brutal at times. And I mean, he was copying. Yeah. He had a poor bloke. He grew a mustache, and
people were all over him for that mustache.
50% because of the mustache. So I just thought, okay, so it got uploaded like it was overnight here, and I said, before I actually watch the final edit, I'm going to read the comments just to see whether I'm getting pulverized or not. And look, 99% of them were fine, Pete. I just, but then there's the occasional, there's that golden rule, something that Justin Frankel has always instilled in me, is that if you're going to present anything on the internet, just be prepared to be attacked, right? So, I mean, that's just a typical. Yep. And so, I'm reading through and mostly positive, and then I stumble on one where it says, don't pay any attention to this bloke. He's obviously an AMD shill, which
right.
He's absolutely.
So speaking about you, saying you're an AMD shill.
I'm the AMD shill, which is absolutely hysterical, considering that my primary business for 99% of the time that I've been up and running has been Intel only. And but next minute, I get the mate, this guy's making an absolute fool of himself. Don't pay any attention. He doesn't know what he's talking about in regards to AMD. He should take a big cup of shut the fuck up and stick to Intel. And I thought, what the hell was all that about? Because I pissed some AMD guy off because he was accusing me of casting shade on AMDs because I dared actually present some data in regards to maximum memory capacity that I've been offering the Intel and AMD machines, right? The Z790 and the Ryzen 7 series. And with the AMD DDR5 machines, you can run the dual channel, 2 sticks. You can run them at whatever speed you want. And we comfortably run them at 5600 is what I've been running because that's what I default to with the Intel and the AMD machines. But when it comes to the 4 sticks, the Intels we can run comfortably at 48. You can't run them above 50 unless you want to sit there and hand tune memory, and you can't do that at a commercial level, right? So
even with matched sets, it can be a real chore to try to get
absolutely.
that to work,
It's very, very difficult, right? So 4800 up to 100. I offer up to 128, but I will be offering up to 192 because once we get the 48 gig DIMMs into the channel here at a reasonable price, I'll be offering up to 192, right, on the Intels at 4800, right?
Nice.
AMDs, I mean, the official qualification for AMDs with 4 chips is 3600, and that's exactly what I quoted. This guy lost his mind, saying, I'm casting shade, and how dare you, and shut the fuck up. And I'm like, oh, wow, all right, okay. And I'm thinking, I'm not even going to respond. I'm not going to enter into that. But so what I did is I actually asked Pete Kane over at Scan, who's, he's all over these machines daily where I'm not. I said, listen, did we miss anything in regards to a BIOS update on these AMD platforms with running the 4 memory DIMMs at, can we get them running at 48? Now, Pete spent the whole day with all these different memory brands and qualifications at different speeds and stuff, and tried to qualify these at anything up to around 48. He couldn't get any of them running at 48, right? Yeah. And so he posted a response to this guy. He's saying, you do realise that the official AMD qualification is 3600. The guy never came back. But I just thought, look, apart from those two, it was mostly positive. But I mean, the poor old Tom with the mustache, he...
To be fair, that mustache though, I understand why people gave him crap over it, even though I never watched stuff before that.
But 50% of the comments were about his mustache. Forget about the content we presented,
Yeah. And none of it was about the product placements that are behind him on the shelf or anything like that.
Yeah, well, hey, you do what you do. So anyway, it was look, I had fun on the show, so it was fine. People can.
And you did that was a really good podcast. I don't know that everybody kind of got the content you were delivering, but the people who did really did, because the stuff you were dropping in there was really factual and super relevant. And I did see a lot of comments around like, wow, I didn't realize why this thing had more latency or something like that. So people did really learn stuff.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. And I think it's because the subject matter usually on that channel is more gamers, right?
Yeah.
But it was surprising how many content creators and DAW users were actually following that channel as well, and they were rapt. This going, hey, about time you actually covered this. So look, it was good. It was good. Yeah. So now I'll just quickly cover DAWbench, the DAWbench suite, because I've signed off and I've actually released the 2023 version, which is
congratulations.
So thank you very much. Now the reason I was holding off, and I kind of mentioned this in the previous show, was that I was waiting for the Xeon W790 platform to see where that landed and if I needed to expand it further and whatever. And, we're going to be covering that in detail a bit later. So the W series have been released. I knew exactly where the bodies were buried, so I could sign off on it, and I've released it. Now, there's not a lot of changes, but one of the main changes in the DAWbench DSP is the actual music audio content of it. I sourced though I sourced those loops from a purchased construction kit, the CD, probably in the late 90s. And these things were, they were prevalent. They were everywhere, these construction kits. And they used a lot in advertising and anything where there's a short music cue, And it was licensed. And I abided by the licensing. I didn't have to actually credit it. They just said, hey, you can use these loops in your music content creation without any further crediting because you've paid for the CD. And I thought, okay, that's fine.
Right.
So here we are. I mean, look, that DAWbench Universal with that music's probably been 15 years easy, I would say, that I've been using that. And then I received an email from a YouTube content creator that was using the DAWbench in the context of the show, and he got a copyright strike, right? And I went, what? And then so he messaged me. He's going, well, is that original music or is that something that you've sourced from somewhere? And I've just said, look, it's from a CD. And he sent me the details of the guy that's making the copyright strike. And I've gone, that name's not springing up as a CD, a loop content creator. I can't remember the CD. I've been moved multiple times between there. I've lost it, right? So it's just something that I had. And I went, look, so he's questioned the strike. And I went, you know what? That's going to at least give me some motivation to actually get some original music onto it, because DAWbench VI is actually an original composition, right? So I approached one of my close friends here in Melbourne, Dragon Stanek, who's an amazing musician and songwriter and composer. And the music that we actually created isn't a reflection of his compositional skills. It's a reflection of him actually following a brief. And the brief was, can you please just recreate something in a similar style to what's there, but something that you've created from scratch, so that way we can't get any copyright strikes. Now, Dragon did such a brilliant job that if you listen to it, and I mean, I've lived with it for the last 3 weeks or so, or about a month. I can't even remember what the old one sounds like, So it's similar. There are some subtle but very distinct differences, and so that's the major change in DAWbench DSP.
So, Vin, on the copyright strike, like that, you probably know the history of this, but a lot of those that go out are scammy in that people find music that's used in a lot of places and isn't being actively followed up on, and then they submit that as the copyright owner in YouTube, even though they're not.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And then they get to collect all the revenue from the videos that are using it. And if it takes a month for people to realize what's going on, they've made a month's worth of revenue from that they don't have to return.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And I hate that.
Now, can you imagine, I mean, what the potential for the damage that could do to loop creators and content creators, right? That people you've purchased the loops, you're licensed to use them, and then someone makes a copyright strike. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, the potential there is huge. Now, I spoke to Pete Kane about it as well. He just says, Vin, it's happening all over the place, right? Yeah. Because YouTube's algo, it can't differentiate whether it's actually a loop library or not. It just, whatever it's doing to actually analyze it is just going, that's the same as that. All right, bang. And then someone puts a copyright strike. So you're right. It was what the guy did.
It's a person or a company that's doing it knowing full well what they're doing, and the algorithm's dumb, and it's optimized for what they perceive as the copyright holder. So it's really hard to fight those, especially if you're just an individual. There was that whole shit show a while back about the filter sweep that got copyright striked on everybody's videos because somebody had claimed a filter. Because there was filter sweep February protest for it, where everybody was just doing filter sweeps on YouTube, but a freaking filter sweep was being hit. Now, not the same situation as this, but the same net result.
Well, it's the same algorithm that's kind of, flagging the stuff. How stupid, eh? So, so now that's 100% original, and
Awesome.
so that was the main change in DAWbench DSP. I did also officially release the bus test as well. And the only other change in VI is that it's up now to 12,800 notes. I actually signed off on that, and that was the one that where I had some pause because I was expecting the Xeon W790s to actually blow that apart, and it didn't, and we'll detail that a bit later. So that's pretty much covered DAWbench Suite 2023. I will add this one thing, and just DAWbenching in general. There are some other people actually stepping up and doing some of this stuff, which is kind of cool. There was one guy, I think he's in Poland, and he popped up on Gearspace, and he says, "Hey, I've created a DAW benchmarking test," and I wasn't aware of it for a little while, and then I got tagged into it, and mate, I commended this guy. He was getting a bit of pushback going, "What are you bothering doing that for? Vin's been doing it since 2005. I go, no, hold on, right? So I stepped in and I just went, no, hold on, guys. What he's doing is different to what I've done. So, I have created some benchmark sessions that they're primarily designed to actually test the scaling of CPU architectures, right? Now, I did have them across multiple DAWs over the years, but I've streamlined it back to Reaper, and I am contemplating weighing up including another DAW, which I'll might discuss a little bit later because I haven't 100% decided yet. Yeah. But so what he had done is he created a test session. It's more akin to the approach that the Cubase DAW test that Scan and the Steinberg rep had actually developed, where you've got a loaded track and then you just duplicate the loaded track, right? Where my template's already set and you just unmute, right? So it's still similar. You're still incrementally loading the session, right? So he's done it across multiple DAWs, and I'm going from memory here. So there was a Samplitude, Studio One, Cubase, Reaper. I don't think he had Pro Tools. He may have had Pro Tools.
So that's a lot of work. That's nice, though.
Yeah, it's very similar to what I did, probably 10 years ago when I was younger and I had far more energy, right? It was good, and so he presented this video, and there was a few holes, obviously. This is his first go at doing this stuff, and of course people are going, you can't go testing, you can't go testing Reaper with AFX on. You got to turn it off, and people are going, well, if you turn that off, you got to turn off Cubase ASIO Guard, but if you turn off Cubase ASIO Guard, then you're halving your logical processes. So I just stepped in, gave him some encouragement. I just said, look, these are the kind of pitfalls that you're going to be hitting if you start disabling extended playback buffer engines, right? Respective engines. You may as well, the way that you're running the test is the correct way. You just run it with their dedicated extended buffering mechanisms, right? And then just run the test and present your data. I didn't find anything wrong with how he was doing. I thought it was actually very, very good.
Nice. And good on you for not trying to gatekeep that whole process. It's nice to see other people doing it as well.
Yeah, but Pete, like I've said multiple times, I don't own a copyright or a patent on DAW benchmarking. People can actually approach doing these tests in whatever manner that they want, and if they feel that DAWbench has got some gaps in it, because over the years, mate, we've had the peanut gallery going, it's irrelevant, for whatever reason, it's not reflective of real world. So this guy's done more of a real world thing, and he's still getting pushback. And I just thought, mate, you just do you. And I haven't followed on. I hope he hasn't been discouraged and not continuing with that. So that was kind of cool. So I just gave him a bit of advice in how to actually navigate that multiple DAW benchmarking thing, because I touched on it again when I did the bus testing, and that was a shitstorm, Pete, as you remember, right? Because there was all this argument about whether the dynamics of the extended buffering mechanisms and what algorithms were being used and all the rest of it. And the thing there's so many experts out there, and no one was 100% correct. Even myself, I actually admit, with the Studio One, the exact mathematics of the Studio One, the reason I was in kind of, let's just say, in dispute with one of the guys is that because I had a different version to him. Right? I had a different version, and I was discussing it with a mutual friend of ours that works at Presonus. He's in QA, and I've just gone, I'm getting information from directly from Presonus. It's not lining up with what's going on. And then I figured out that they'd actually changed the algorithm between versions, right? And that's what the whole, we'll call it the shitstorm, because it was. And I just thought, man, that's just, I give up trying to sit there and debate about the algorithms of what's being used under the bonnet, because we don't know 100%. I mean, even the guys at Presonus, between the development teams were actually debating what was actually going on there. So, there you go. So, look, I'll encourage that guy to continue that. I hope he does. And the other one I kind of spotted was a professional composer that he built up a test session, and he had probably about 20 tracks, multiple virtual instruments, libraries, doing a short orchestral piece, and then he would grab, I think it was about 20, and then he'd grab that 20 and then he'd go to 40, and then he'd grab that 40 and go to 80, and he just kept multiplying till the thing stopped. Again, golf clap. Hey, that was kind of cool. But apart from that, we're still, I'll just keep my head down. I've been getting suggestions about some additional tests. Everyone's great with the ideas. No one actually is following through with actually helping me to create the other test scenarios. That's all I'll say, right? Because I don't, myself and Pete are not the only ones that have to sit there. If you want me to develop a new testing procedure, you need to step up and actually be very distinct and very clear on how we're actually going to be able to test it and present it in a way that's actually going to be representative and viable for at least a number of test session scenarios, end user session scenarios. So that's it. So I'll sign off on the DAWbench stuff there. Now, NAMM 2003.
23.
What did I say? 2003. God, it's too early. NAMM 2023. Both you and Chris had trips to NAMM and somehow managed to miss each other for the whole time, which is kind of hilarious. But can both of you guys give us a bit of an overview of your experiences at NAMM, please? Whoever wants to go first.
Oh, I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, go.
I hadn't been for a while, so I was sort of pretty excited to go. Now, obviously, I was over for a couple of meetings with manufacturers and sort of link audio business, and then had a little bit of time to wander around on my own. There was obviously some fairly large companies not there. Fender, no Presonus, no Gibson, no PRS, no Roland. So they were pretty major outs. So it did make the show much smaller than it usually is. And now, having said that, I still thought it was massive. So it just goes to prove that even with those guys kind of there, the floor space, there was still a lot of stuff to see. But what's going to be interesting next coming NAMM in January is whether some of those companies return. They probably need to, but I guess they'll make decisions on whether they want to be there or not. I made some notes. I was sort of thinking about it the other day when we were talking about the show, and the Nord stand was absolutely on fire. There were so many people around that. There were so many people around the Pioneer stand. Endless amount of DJs that I'd never heard of, but apparently I was the only one that never heard of them. It was busy, that stand. I'll tell you right now, it was a great looking stand too. They did such a good job. I mean, I'm not the DJ type, but I was very impressed with that stand. Audient was just on fire. There were so many people buzzing around Evo and some of the new stuff that they had done. So that was really cool to see. I really liked the new Hammond stuff that was kind of there. I did spend quite a bit of time in the little software corner, and I couldn't get anywhere near the Bitwig Studio 5 machines. There was just so many people playing with it that I even waiting for 15, 20 minutes, I couldn't get near it. So that was kind of a little bit annoying. But
well, that's cool.
Yeah, it was. There was a little software, little patch there, and one of the probably more exciting things on a bit of a personal level was the UVI guys were there. And I'm a big UVI fan. I've got a lot of UVI plugins, and it was just really cool to pull one of those guys aside, and I think we chatted nonstop for an hour about all sorts of stuff. And they've developed a bit of a platform where they're able to keep producing really old instruments and adding to their collection. So that was a buzz. I really enjoyed doing that. And then there was just kind of really weird stuff where everyone would go around and go, "Have you played that Donna drum D1 drum kit?" And I'm like, "No, why would I? Why would I want to go? No, you've got to go sit down. The thing sounds amazing." And I'm, all right.
Was that in the basement? Was that in the basement?
Yeah, it was in a
the
completely
basement.
different hall.
I used to love the basement. Yeah, it was all the weird
The
ass
basement was
stuff.
actually closed this year.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the bottom floor. I think it was near the entry where you sort of went in. But I sat in front of it and was like, "This thing's amazing and it's cheap. Good on these guys. They'll probably sell a ton." So that was kind of cool. You know, had a chat to some of the Australian guys that were there too. The guys with the Nina synth, and that was kind of interesting speaking to them. And again, I had to wait 20 minutes to get on that because I was obviously moving around in between other time sort of schedules that we had put in for meetings with some of our suppliers. So, look, I had a really great NAMM. I thought it was really cool. I was really encouraged by the amount of musicians walking around, playing instruments, you know, the amount of people that were happy to go and blow into as many tubas as they possibly could in the aisle. And, there was a lot of that, you know, and that was really cool. So, you know, I mean, we had a good NAMM for as far as all the manufacturers that we spoke to, and I didn't see anything massively new. I didn't see anything that I thought was, you know, the next kind of thing. I mean, there was some cool synths and some other bits and pieces in that audio tech space, but huge buzzers for us around Atmos, huge buzzers around AI plugins. But yeah, it was cool. It was busy. I was running up and down like a madman. And everyone kept telling me that it was a little bit colder than normal. Sorry, no, it was warmer than normal. So I got that the wrong way around because they're normally there in January.
Yep.
But yeah, all round I had good fun. I got to the MIDI 2.0 stand, but I did miss Pete, but I did have a bit of a play around there too. But I'll let him talk on that. But overall, I had a great time.
Yeah. Any marching bands?
Yep. and the outside stages, the Yamaha stage outside had some, you know, in and out had some really great bands playing, and some. It had a big buzz. You know, there was certainly a lot going on. So
yeah. Well, you know the in joke about the marching band at NAMM, though, don't you?
Yes.
Pete's laughing. Chris, do you know about the in joke about the marching band at NAMM?
Go on.
There was a very prominent music technology guy that is quite forward in announcing how good his products are, and he was trying to demo one of these said products out on the floor, right? And he kept getting,
This is so funny.
He kept getting interrupted by this marching band, and and in the end, he ends up just completely loses his shit, and it's all on video, and I'm laughing my head off because, you know, I've had some moments with this music tech entrepreneur, and I've just thought, oh man, it's a classic. You can't go doing that level of demo on the floor at NAMM. It's just impossible. He didn't have a room. It was just
but a
this
freaking marching band, like nobody was anticipating that, but it was so good.
Oh, it was
You have to look it up.
Oh, mate, I
Yeah,
got tears in my eyes. I was just laughing.
It's
about
not a
this.
surprise. It was busy and it was noisy, but that's what trade shows are. You know, you're never going to get super close to stuff.
No.
And you're never going to be able to do do that, but that's not really what it's about, you know.
Have a private room at a hotel if you're really going to be doing it. You know, the listening tests at that type of level. You know, I mean, we've done that, Chris. You know it. So, look, it is interesting that some of those bigger guys weren't there, and that was some of the feedback and discussion that I had picked up on, where, you know, people that had attended were. And it was kind of split. Some are saying this thing's dying, and other people are saying, "What are you on about? It was great." So this is why I wanted to get your direct feedback.
I don't think it's dying. I think what the problem may be is that if some of these bigger companies don't decide they're going to spend $1 million or whatever it is that they're spending,
the booths,
is that it probably becomes more of a local show, and it probably doesn't attract so many internationals. I think that's probably the only danger that it's in, but there was certainly enough local musicians around, and it was good to see enormous amounts of school groups and stuff moving around, you know, being interested in music. So
that's good. Yeah.
That's a really positive thing.
Yeah, I think it is the costing of the stands and stuff. I think we've discussed this offline. It was just horrendous, just the amount of money that is needing to be committed to that type of stuff. And look, Messa in Europe, that's gone. Messa's gone completely, you know.
The other thing to consider, though, Vin, is when you're looking at some of these big companies like Roland, you know, like Chris said, wasn't there. Korg didn't have their layout. And Yamaha, which usually takes the whole bottom floor of the Marriott, wasn't there at all there either. They were all trying to get there from Japan, and there were still a lot of COVID-related things, especially around China and stuff that were, I know from talking to these people, made travel, like, if not impossible, super stressful for them.
Yeah, but I mean, they've got American representation there. I mean, there's
but that's not who really like sets up the booths and gets all the equipment and all that stuff, you know.
Okay, fair enough. All right, fair enough. So, well, it'll be interesting because it's. So, what month was that held in? Was that March, April? No, what was it, guys? Where was it?
April. I think it was.
Where it's traditionally in January. So let's see where it happens. What happens when it goes back to January? So, Pete, how was your NAMM?
So it was really good. So this year, I didn't get to stay as long as possible because I had to run to another event afterwards. But the big thing for us there was the MIDI 2.0 booth, and then the MIDI at 40 and hip hop at 50 celebrations out on the Yamaha stage, right?
MIDI at 40. Yep.
Yeah. So we arranged all the performances and stuff for that, which were at the end of the day on Saturday, and they were. I loved it. I loved every second of those performances. So that was really kind of the big thing there. And then out on the floor, I spent most of my time hanging out at the MIDI booth, walking people through stuff. We had a demo version of the upcoming MIDI 2.0 USB driver on Windows, and we had it there on an Intel PC and also an ARM64 PC, just to show where we've got them both covered. So I answered a lot of questions about that. I did notice a lot of the things that, you know, Chris was saying that there weren't, well, you might not notice this unless you've been to them like a couple of years ago. The synthesizer representation and the audio interface representation was, I don't want to say zero, but it was approaching zero for this one. And that's what I always go looking for. But I did spend a fair bit of time talking to the folks the Melbourne Instruments folks about the Nina synth.
Yes, and that's a cool thing, isn't it? It's amazing.
It's a cool thing. So I don't know if folks realize what's running inside that, but I talked to them because I looked up some information about the operating system that they use, because they use an open source operating system from Elk Audio,
right?
And it's based on Linux, but that operating system is designed to run VSTs. Right. So that's what it does.
Yes.
And I asked him, I was like, so how are you using this to control a synth? Because when I looked into it, it had no like envelope generators or CV or any of that kind of stuff. It just ran VSTs. And they were telling me, oh yeah, we created VSTs that send CV out to the different analog audio. Like, so they have this interesting bridge where inside the synthesizer are a bunch of VSTs that handle envelopes and CV going out to analog audio and whatnot, and interfacing with the motorized faders and all those things, which were super cool.
Yep.
In kind of like a hacky way, but it was interesting.
Yep. So let's make a point of what this instrument is. It's actually an analog synthesizer.
Yep.
With motorized control.
Yeah, and they're using like the drone motor type motors underneath each knob, and it sounds super gimmicky until you use it. And they've got things where each patch can have its own like detents on a particular knob. So if you want to quantize something to like say 10 different values on a knob, the motor provides those detents for you.
Yeah.
So it's not just that the knobs all automatically move whenever you load a patch. It's that kind of tactile feedback you get when you're moving them, which
okay.
I didn't get until I tried it, and then I found it super compelling.
Yeah. And Chris, did you know anything about this? This thing's been developed in our own backyard. I heard about.
It was the first I'd heard of it. Rocking up to now, I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, I'd heard about it. I think on the last year. Right, I saw a snippet of it. I'm thinking, where do these guys actually develop? So there you go. I mean, how awesome is that? This thing's been developed in Melbourne, Australia. So where they got the funding, I don't know, but good on them. And let's hope that it actually gets some success. I'm not even. Is it officially released, Pete? I don't even know if it's officially released.
Yeah, you can buy it now. I don't know at what level of release or how many they're making, but I understand that you can buy them now.
Yeah, I thought there was some crowdfunding involved as well. It's from memory.
I don't think with that one, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well there you go. And so the MIDI 2 was well received there, and yes, and like you mentioned, it was a 40th anniversary, so that was very, very cool.
Yeah, that was, and it was, there was one other cool MIDI 2 demo, which sort of slid by, like most people didn't realize it was the first public demonstration of MIDI 2 controller keyboard talking to a computer and software on there. And the computer was running Mac OS, the keyboard was a Roland piano, and the musicians that came by that kind of could really play piano were talking about how much better the articulation is, and it's so much more sensitive and stuff. So I was really kind of chuffed about that.
Yeah, I mean, the resolution compared to MIDI 1 is through the roof, and that's going to be the main draw to MIDI 2. So very cool, very cool. All right, I think let's move on. Tech releases. Let's just do a bit of a roundup of some releases and some mergers and acquisitions.
The exciting part.
Yes, sorry. Oh, you mean this?
Oh, no.
Right.
Sorry, I was being a smart ass and talking about mergers and acquisitions on your podcast.
Right, okay, well, just thanks, mate. But I think this is important. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but the interesting one for me was, and we spoke about this on the last show, where my understanding was that Native Instruments had acquired Isotope, right, and Plug-in Alliance. That's not correct, right? What the reality was that there was a venture capitalist firm that had acquired all three of them and then placed them under a new banner called Soundwide. Now, did you know that
nobody had ever heard of them?
I didn't even they placed it under Soundwide, and the only reason it kind of sparked up some interest is that Native Instruments then. Well, Soundwide then announced that they were renaming this, this alliance and group of companies, and they're going to be just managing under the Native Instruments brand. I've gone, what? Yeah. So they're going back to the Native Instruments brand, and everyone's kicking up, going, whoa, what's going on? And I'm thinking, hang on, I need to read into this a little bit further. So that was an interesting one for me because, so you didn't know anything about this Soundwide branding. Chris, did you know anything about this Soundwide branding?
No.
So
nobody did. That's why they had to change it back.
Yeah, but the thing is that everyone just was under the understanding that Native Instruments had actually acquired these other two companies. That was my understanding.
Well, I think it's a weird, I don't remember if Native Instruments created, now there's like some subtlety to the arrangement there. I don't think it's quite the same as some of the other acquisitions we were talking about. Well,
the thing is that this whoever this company was, that it was branded under Soundwide, they had actually acquired all three at the same time. That was my understanding, which was completely different to what my understanding was. So, look, that's okay. Again, this is just me making a point of the kind of blowback they got by naming it back to Native Instruments when no one even knew that it actually changed the branding from Native Instruments. So I thought, yeah, that was kind of a really weird type of dynamic, right? Where I'd only known that they'd actually changed the name when they announced that they were changing it back. So, okay, all right. The other one, Moog. This is Moog. Sorry, Moog. That was a recent one, acquired by InMusic. Now, I kind of knew about InMusic a bit. Chris probably knows a lot more about them. Do you want to kind of give us, your view on that one, InMusic and Moog? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I have a lot of thoughts about it, but look, there's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of companies buying up other companies and putting them in their stables, I guess.
In their portfolio. Yeah.
It'll be, look, I think there's always benefits and there's always, I guess, not benefits when this happens. The best case scenario is that they keep funding it and they keep developing products and we all get to benefit from new products.
Yep.
The worst case scenario is that they don't do anything, they shelve it and it goes away.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen plenty of examples over a period of time of both things happening. So you want to hope that it's they keep funding it and they keep all the people that need to stay in the company to develop products. But why and how, you don't always know. They could have been not making much money for the last 5 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's really hard to know, but certainly it's happening a lot.
Yeah. So with
Hey Vin, Vin. So I was looking it up, and I knew there was some subtlety around Soundwide. Now I realize what happened. So Soundwide was created when Isotope, Native Instruments, Plug-in Alliance, and Brainworks all came together. So that it wasn't like an acquisition. They all got together and probably couldn't agree that one brand should rule them all. So they came up with this odd name that nobody knows about and created that holding company.
Right.
And then they realized, oh, this was really stupid. And so then Native Instruments took over the brand there.
Right. Okay. Well, that's cool. All right. That's good. That clarifies that. Now, just real quickly, with InMusic, Chris, what are some of the other brands that are under that umbrella? Off the top of your head, you don't have to name all of them.
Alesis.
Yep.
I can't remember the others.
Akai.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Akai.
There's more than you think.
M Audio.
Headrush.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of stuff that they do.
Yeah.
And they've been quietly, grabbing those over a period of time as well. So it's a huge, more brands than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, again, these, I'm always hesitant and a little bit concerned when venture capitalists basically grabbing up all of these brands, because in the end, these are investment operations, and then if the investment doesn't start, they don't start getting any return, they're going to start shutting it down. We saw that with Gibson and numerous brands.
But at least within music, they're in the industry. It's not some rando venture capitalist firm that we have to deal with.
Yeah, but in music isn't a venture. They're not the venture capitalists. That's just an umbrella company that is being funded by the venture capitalists. This is the point I was making.
Ah, okay.
So ImageLine, and this is an interesting one because one of these brands actually came up in Chris's comments before. UVI in Melda. So I mean, not huge, but that's a nice little acquisition from that company. They're just like one of these smaller companies, like the little engine that could. They just keep sitting there and cranking away.
They were super quiet about this whole thing too. Like, ImageLine is very quiet about this stuff. Like I was reading up on this earlier, and I didn't even know about that Waterland private equity thing because ImageLine doesn't talk about it. But they've made this really big point that they didn't use any of that. Like, it's not an acquisition. It's actually just they injected some cash or something like that.
Funding.
Yeah. And that wasn't used for the purchases. Apparently ImageLine was able to do the purchasing of these different brands themselves, because it's not just UVI and Melda, but also WA production and producer loops and some other stuff.
Right. So, but again, there's another venture capitalist firm that are actually that were involved in melding that whole thing together. So you just mentioned Immortal and private equity. That doesn't sound very musical to me.
No, and if you look at what they hold, it has nothing to do with music anywhere. So I don't know why that relationship exists. But hey,
Subscription based.
Yeah.
I mean, these subscription based models can and do make money.
Yep.
But ImageLine still does the lifelong
Updates.
like free forever. And this Waterland thing happened apparently a couple of years ago.
Right.
That's not recent. So ImageLine hasn't been forced to change that. So good on them for not getting rid of their kind of lifetime updates.
Yeah. And like Chris mentioned, we'd be surprised how many of these professional audio companies and instrument manufacturers are actually being propped up by venture capital money.
Yeah. It's a little scary.
Yep. The last one with this one, because I know this is not exactly your favorite section of the show, Pete. This is just a rumor, but it's kind of picking up a little bit of chatter. Is that Avid is up for sale? Chris, you heard anything on the grapevine?
No, nothing. We need to tell the venture capitalist.
Look, this wouldn't be the first time. It's the first time they've put it up. So I don't know how much meat that's got, but that's just one that I kind of picked up on. So I thought I'd mention it.
Watch this space.
Yep. Now, real quickly, new releases. Pro Tools 23.6. Now, the Pro Tools updates are almost... it's almost like Groundhog Day. They add a few little features and that type of stuff. But the reason I'm going to mention this one, and Pete's going to cringe, is that they made a big point that they've added, wait for this one, MMCSS optimization. Now, I'm like, you serious? You're going to go there now? I mean, MMCSS has been around since, hang on, correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, 2008. And
yeah, it's been around the block a few times.
Yeah, and Avid have just stuck their hand up and gone, hey, guess what? They've just optimized Windows with MMCSS optimizations. And I've thought, oh, please don't break it. Look, however they've actually implemented it, Pete, and this is something that you would understand far better than me, is that however they've implemented it, it has not caused the problems that we saw with the Steinberg product, right? Well, not yet. I haven't had any reports of this thing fallen over with the higher core machine. So, fingers crossed that they've actually implemented it correctly and or in a manner that it is not going to be impacting the core operation of the program.
That would be great. Maybe they're actually following our guidance on how to do this. So great on them.
That's what I meant by they've implemented it correctly, right?
Yeah.
And look, Avid, they're always a bit slow to introduce stuff. I mean, you fire up the latest version of Pro Tools on Windows 10 or 11, and the actual frames of the G, mate, it's Windows 7 Basic. It's still that light blue, and I'm like looking at this, going, can you just fix this? I mean, I remember speaking to some of my Avid contacts about this. Probably, well, hang on. Windows 10. What's that? 2015. So I've been talking about it for 8 years going, can you just fix this? So whatever it is that is so embedded in whatever that GUI portion of that application, they can't get it to actually get the normal Windows frames to wrap it. I mean,
it's weird.
Can you have any idea why, Pete, from a programming level?
Well, as I recall, it's just a flag on the window that you create, but it kind of depends if they've got some like deep and murky toolkit they're using for creating the windows and managing all that stuff.
Yeah, but where are they pulling that graphic?
Oh, no, that's still there. That's still in Windows today for backwards compatibility, and you set a flag on the window if I forget the exact thing, but if you're using an old API and you don't set the flag, you get the old you get the old Windows frame.
Actually, you're 100% correct. You know why? Because I've updated my Office machine and to the latest Windows 10, and I fired up my old accounting software, which is from year 2001. Believe it or not, still works. And yeah, I've got the Windows 7 nice blue frames.
Looks so out of place though.
But that's understandable because the application was written in 2001. And how's that? How's that for Okudo? It's still running in Windows 10.
Yeah.
In 2023.
We don't change it automatically because that actually changes the size of the window frame and the borders and things like that. And if we were to automatically change that on applications, their calculations for how to space things would be off.
Yeah.
And it can cause stuff to get like clipped off the edge and things like that.
Look, it's just a really weird one for me. I would have thought there's no other DAW that I fire up that's got that problem. And every time I update my Pro Tools and I fire it up and I've got my fingers crossed and one eye kind of closed, going, please, not still there, you know.
Cubase was doing it for quite a long time. Like it took them a while to update theirs. So.
No, only on version 6, only below version 7.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
So if you're running Windows 10 and on anything below version 7, so Cubase 6, mate, that's like, come on, you know.
Yeah. I just remember for the first couple of years of Windows 8.1 and Windows 10 that it still had the old
weird
Windows frames in there.
Yeah. I never really had that because if I was running Windows 7, I had a custom style and it would actually wrap those in the style that I was using, whether it was Aero or Basic. You know, I had a Basic version that looked exactly the same as Aero, so I kind of bypassed that one. What have we got? Oh, Bitwig 5. I haven't really. I mean, I know that it's actually caused quite a stir. I mean, was that you or Chris was saying that it was packed? It was Chris. Chris was saying that
you couldn't get near the computer. I mean, they only had one or two, but there was still people buzzing around it. Sure.
Yeah. Look, I like that application, and
it's cool.
I like the development team and stuff as well, and there's some really nice features in it. And look, it's another one of those little engine that could type of software, and I'm hoping that it just gets a wider reach. But if the booth at NAMM was any indication, that's a good sign. Studio One 6.2. Now this is one closer to you, Chris. There's some nice little features that are added, but one of the ones that I was actually kind of given a bit of a heads up.
Dropout protection.
Yeah, the dropout protection. They've actually allowed it to be disabled completely, but this is simply just for testing purposes and stuff. Where that's perfect is that it's perfect for me, where I can sit there and test the application at its native buffer.
No, it's perfect for me too. I've already disabled mine.
Okay. So that's a cool feature. There's not much else as far as new releases and stuff. Pete, Chris, anything else that have I missed anything?
Just on the Studio One front, Fender / Presonus have renamed the Sphere package, which is the thing that you subscribe to get everything, to Studio One Plus.
Oh, that's right.
So just a little bit of marketing. I kind of like it because I like the Studio One name, so I think that's logical.
Yeah.
But hasn't changed anything. If you want everything, it's there as a plus now.
Yeah. Yep. I think we can move on to emerging tech. Now, we've already covered MIDI 2 a bit. Is there anything there, Pete, that you can add further to the MIDI, what's happening with MIDI 2? Because I'd actually like to do a whole show on it at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, since the last time we got together and did a podcast, our MIDI 2.0 stack, talking about the Microsoft side of things here.
Yep.
We've opened the repo because this is all open source for us. We're developing all the MIDI 2.0 stuff in the open. So the USB driver, the new Windows service that goes with it, the API and the SDK and all that stuff is out there on GitHub.
Yep.
And we'll have another. I've been working with some developers who, and Chris, you might also find this amusing because we know the history of some of these things, but the developers that are using Delphi as their main tool for development, which it's one of those rare hens that you see it out there and you're like, wait a minute, somebody's still using that. So there are a few developers I've been working with doing that.
I know one that's stuck with.
Yeah, and it's not even that one that we're thinking of.
Ah, right, okay, wow, okay,
yeah, so that's why when this person approached me, I was like, wait, there's somebody else using this.
Still using Delphi.
Yeah. And I started on Delphi 1.0 back in like 1992 or something. I forget what year it was, 94 or somewhere around there.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's being developed in the open. I've been working with some of the developers there. It's a little different process than we've done before, where I'm actually talking to hardware and DAW developers and being like, how about this in the API? Does this work for you? As opposed to just throwing something over at them, which, not to toot my own horn a whole lot, but I think it's a better way of going about developing something like that.
Of course.
And then we'll have another developer release sometime next month, and then there's a private event where we're bringing through the MIDI Association that's similar to what we did in Japan back in March, where we'll get the hardware developers over there and do a bit of a plug fest in Redmond in October, where they'll be testing out all their stuff and making sure it works properly, and then we'll have our first release of the new MIDI stack around the end of the year. And that'll be kind of like bare bones what we need to do to support all these hardware devices. And then we keep adding more features there as we go on through 2024.
Awesome. So it's steaming along by the sound of it, Pete.
Yeah.
It's actually picked up momentum. That's very, very good. Now, I've got a couple of other listed here. GPU audio, that the reason I've got that, and I am going to be doing a show with these guys, but I'm actually just waiting for it to actually get a little bit wider adoption. Now, they did score a major third party with the development with Vienna Ensemble have got their convolution reverb is now running on that GPU audio engine.
Oh, nice.
Right? So that was a major score for them, but I haven't seen any other major moves just yet, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around the requirement of a dedicated GPU. So where it will work better with an iGPU and then a dedicated GPU. I don't know exactly how it's working with the Max Silicon, unless it's only working on the dual chip Max, right? So these are the dots that I need to connect before I get the boys on, and I've spoken to them. They're really keen to come on, and I'm just biding my time a little bit just so that I get myself. It's more me, right? That I need to get my head completely around this whole environment and the dynamics involved across platform, and then I'll have them on, and they can sit there and unleash all of the technical detail of it.
The Mac part is probably the more interesting part, surely, because there's these huge amount of GPU cores that have been unused, but there's also on these chips absolutely no support for external graphics cards. So it'd be interesting to see
how they're doing it.
Correct. Or if they can do it, if Apple allows them to do it. So
yeah, no, they are doing it, and we had some discussion about this on the previous show where I've just thought, well, because I'm reading in between the lines, and because there were some problems with, for example, the AMD Ryzens, where they didn't have a dedicated iGPU, right?
Surely there's no AMD problems.
Well, there was previously, right?
There's somebody violently typing in the comments right now.
Someone being sarcastic. You should take a cup and shut the fuck up, Chris.
Yeah,
probably should.
Chill.
You fucking chill. Yeah. Look, there was some problems that's been resolved with Ryzen 7, right? Ryzen 7000, obviously, because they've got the iGPU, and the initial Mac testing was the Intel Max, right? iGPU plus a dedicated, right? And I was reading in between the lines with the Apple Silicon, and they were testing on the Ultras, right? The Ultras have the two chips, and I'm thinking, is that how they're doing it? So I've got to look into it a little bit further, and I am going to have the boys on, and that one's going to be like, mate, put your propeller head on, because there is some amazing technology that they've actually pulled off there to pull that off, right? So still developing, but one that I'm watching very, very closely. And the other thing as well is that because it's requiring these larger GPUs, and we're kind of going in the other direction with the DAWs, is that, we're not even, in a lot of instances, we're not even running dedicated GPUs, right? We're running the iGPUs, and they work perfectly for the 2D DAW environments, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, and then it's going to lead into, if you're going to be running multiple GPUs for DSP, then you're going to need an HEDT platform, and that's where that's going to be the shitstorm that I'm going to be unleashing after we get past this section, right?
I like this running, or I like Vienna Ensemble Pro being sort of an early one in this, because you can have a dedicated box that's separate from your main workstation that
Correct.
You stuff a couple of GPUs into, and it's off in the corner where you can't hear the fan noise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, your retired mining rigs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now the next one I want to chat about, and this one has been a really interesting one for me, just watching this developed, is Atmos. Now, myself and Pete, and I'm very proud to say that we were ahead of the curve on this one. All right, we were Nostradamusing this, that this thing was going to take off, and we'd approached Dolby early on, and I've already covered this a couple of times, so we won't cover it again. But we were on it, right? We got thinking this thing could take off. And it did, especially when Apple released their version of it. What's it called? Immersive audio, or whatever it's called. I can't remember. What's the Apple one called? Chris, help me out here.
The Apple one? You mean like in their iTunes store where you can buy all the stuff? Or?
No, whatever their version of Atmos is, because it's not Atmos, it's something else. They call it, I thought it was immersive audio. Is it immersive audio? Well, Apple have got to always rename stuff. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the Apple users out there. Please don't attack us too hard, but I can't remember what it's called. But it's Atmos. It's their version of Atmos, slightly stripped down. Now, the interesting stuff with that is that there is, and again, you just mentioned that the Atmos booth over at NAMM was mental, right? So it has...
It's huge in the US.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all that we spoke about. We also do Apogee here in Australia, and everything to do with the Apogee day before NAMM that we went to was Atmos.
In regards to music creation, right? As in music, not as in audio for film, right? And TV. This is what we were initially actually thinking. This is where it's going to take off. And this is thanks to Apple releasing this Atmos music, right? And I can't remember what they call it. See, it's too early in the morning. So that they have definitely kickstarted that. Now, I've been watching some and reading some interesting commentary on that whole Atmos for music, right? And I've got clients that have set up rooms and they're going gangbusters. There's a lot of people doing this stuff, right? And the question for me has always been, who's going to be consuming this stuff, right? So there's all the expense. There's you're doing your normal stereo mix for your music. And I'm not talking about TV and film, right? So we're talking about music only. And there's your music content, and you do your stereo mix and your mastering and everything else. And then people are listening to this stuff, whether it's on a, hi-fi stereo type of environment, whether they're listening to it via their iPod, whether they're listening to it on their phones with their headphones and whatever else, right? So that is the majority of the listening environments, right? So who is actually going to be consuming the Atmos music mixes, right? And what is required to actually translate and actually enjoy that? So I don't know how far you guys have looked into it.
There's a few things with it. So selling a lot of hardware for Atmos people now, what we see going on is that a lot of the recording studios got massive amount of months of literally trying to turn everything in their backline catalog into Atmos.
Right.
So there's a lot of remixing going on. It's been done in pretty high-end studios. There's a lot of really good work, and there's also a lot of really shabby stuff.
Yep.
Like we spoke to a few people over at NAMM who we said, I've just heard your release of this that you've just done. We're always a big fan of that piece of music. And they're like, no, we didn't do that. Somebody's done that and just put it up. So there's still a few issues around how that's happening. But as far as the consumption goes, It's mostly going to be sound bars at people's homes, and it's probably going to be headphones and bits and pieces that are capable of producing some form of surround. It's probably not going to be the cinema guys with their Atmos setup, because they probably haven't worked out how to get 4 speakers in their ceiling yet.
Yep.
But the more that Apple push this in iTunes, and the more that people want to consume it, the more legs it grows. I think that's kind of where it's at. But there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of people that, one, are not doing it properly. Some of the quality of it's pretty bad. And it'll get better over time. But you are right. The consumption is probably going to be phones. It's probably going to be VR headsets. It's probably going to be very simple soundbars at home. But it seems to be something that people are wanting to pay for. Well, not pay for, but as part of their subscription to be able to enjoy. So it is interesting.
Yep.
So Apple calls it spatial audio.
That's the one.
Dolby Atmos. Not to be confused with the spatial audio Microsoft has for games and VR headsets.
So spatial audio, and there's immersive audio, which is not exactly, they're not necessarily the same thing. So thank you for that, Peter, because I had immersive audio in my head. And the reason being is that I watched a really good video and I read a really detailed article. And both of these guys are saying, hey, you know what? They were essentially saying, as music creators, don't get gaslit into thinking that you need to do an Atmos mix, right? This was their premise, how they approached it. And one of the videos was awesome, where he just said, he goes, you know what, I'm going to take my hat off of being a music content creator and be a consumer. So is
this the Ben Jordan video?
That's the one, right? So Ben's
great.
Ben went out and bought all of this gear, extra gear, and then he's trying to set up this Atmos listening environment. I don't know if you've seen it, Chris, but it's the video is actually quite entertaining and it's quite enlightening as well. So, I mean, Ben's not an idiot, right? I mean, he's got some technical chops, and he's trying to set this environment up in his room, and he just couldn't get this immersive experience happening with the music stuff, right? Whether it was a sound bar and all the extra speakers, and he definitely couldn't get anything with the headphones, right? So his whole argument was, look, we understand this is going to be a thing, and there's a lot of good work. He also said there's some stuff is just shitful, right? You know,
and that's the problem. Yeah, the Dolby renderer is not that easy to use.
Yeah,
you need a little bit of experience. But having sat in the Apogee studios and listened to Bob Clearmountain's Atmos mixes of some of his back catalogue, I was sucked in straight away.
Yeah,
I don't know how I'm going to do it at home, but I'm working on it.
But that's the thing. Chris, right? And a lot of this music won't translate to that type of listening experience.
Correct, it won't.
Now, mate, if you're talking Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, bring it on, all right? Because remember they had the whole quadraphonic thing. You probably have to kind of toke up on a jazz cigarette or two, but you know, that stuff can actually
just to get the full experience.
Yes, that lends itself to the immersive stuff, or a bit of Tangerine Dream or something like that, right? Yeah. Or some of this, like I've been listening to some Dark Atmos stuff recently to pull me away from, you know, the highly technical, progressive stuff that I listen to a lot. And so just to chill out, especially when I was doing my paperwork, you know, this week, and I just had some Dark Atmos stuff on, and sometimes I even forget that it's there. But it did a couple of things. One, it actually kept me very calm, and two, well, hilarious, Dark Atmos keeping me calm, and two, it was kind of you know, taken away from my tinnitus, right? So I don't have to have anything really loud. It was actually low, and it was quite good. That stuff there and surround probably scared the shit out of me, actually. But that was I could see that atmospheric music, Atmos music, lending itself very well to it. I couldn't see some of my prog metal bands, you know, needing, you know, what is it, 14 speaker immersive audio.
each one at a different time signature.
That's right. But it's a creative process, right? So when you're sitting there in front of it, working out what can I do, because literally it's unlimited, you've got to make the right decisions for the music that you're listening to. You know, it's if you're trying to remix a concert where you're literally looking at a stage in front of you, there is no way that it makes any sense to put everything behind you, because if you were sitting there, you weren't hearing anything behind you other than a bit of crowd noise. So
unless you're at a Pink Floyd or Roger Waters concert,
well, yeah,
Get the pig flying overhead and all that.
that's right.
get the flying pig. Yeah.
So it's an interesting area, but yeah, I think we're going to have to learn how to filter some of the stuff that creatively has maybe not so good, or some of those decisions haven't been great.
Some people can't even get their mixes to stop phasing in stereo, right? So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what happens when each audio source is an object that you can independently move around.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, the wider consumer level for this would be with those headphones, and I don't know how that even actually operates.
That projects it back again. It messes with phase and a bunch of other stuff, and projects it back to stereo. And it's kind of like, what are we really getting out of that? What we think we're getting out of that?
No, and I think that
Folks
was
should watch Ben's video.
Ben's video, and there was also an article that I think I sent you as well that was actually quite good. So, that's one. It's emerging. I haven't dived in, but it. Chris said, if that booth at NAMM was any indication, and also those demos, this is going to be huge. And again, I'm quite proud to say myself and Pete, we were a good 12 months ahead of this hysteria. Easy, Pete, easy 12 months ahead of the hysteria. So there you go. I just pat myself on the back a little bit there.
Chris will give you a pat in the back. There you are.
Yeah, he'll probably give me a slap in the side of the head. But Now, next one, AI. This is huge, all right? And the last podcast that we did, Pete, with Stian from Acon Digital, we were talking about AI, because the AI tools that Acon Digital have produced, especially with the dialogue restorations, it's just amazing,
Phenomenal. Spectacular.
Mate, it's just, Chris, you've got to come over. I'm going to show you some of this stuff, right? It's just phenomenal, right? In our pre-chat with Pete a couple of, last week, you had some problems with the studio, you had some flooding or something, and you'd rearrange some stuff, and I'm going, Pete, there is this massive hum. And he goes, I can't hear it, Vin. I've gone, mate, trust me, there's this massive hum. And what was it? It ended up being the 60 hertz hum, right?
Yeah, I had a box laying on top of a cable, and that was enough to, even though it was a balanced cable.
It was horrible, right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, this is a good test. So I actually just fired up some of the Acon Digital stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's the standard denoisers, dehummers, all of that. It was fine, right?
Was there a preset for cable on box?
But hang on, just hear me out, right? So, but with the denoisers, the traditional denoisers, you always get a little bit of artifacting with the voice, all right? Doesn't matter how good it is, and their stuff, their algorithms, a little
bit of that underwater effect.
Yeah, kind of, right? And so you can't set and forget, right? Mm-hmm. But Extract Dialogue, which is their AI powered plugin, right? Which essentially Extract Dialogue does exactly that. It's all under AI machine learning. It picks the voice, right? There's your dialogue voice, right? And then it focuses on that and removes everything else. But not as soon as you can just, I don't even play with the settings. I just had it on the reset setting, right? And I flicked it on and it just went bang, and the quality of Pete's voice did not change one iota. Just the whole anything in the rear of it just disappeared. All right,
nice.
That stuff is amazing, and I've used those plugins, the AI powered dialogue plugins from Acon Digital across a couple of shows now. Whether it was deplosive, whether it was removing a room reverb, reverberation, it's phenomenal. And you set and forget, and to pick up an artifact, you got to be really good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to have headphones on and go, there was a tiny little artifact right at the end of something, right? But it doesn't actually alter the tonality and the quality of the actual dialogue. And so that's the stuff with AI that I find phenomenal, right? For the music production stuff. Some of the generative AI stuff, I'm not so warm and fuzzy about.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a whole nother show.
Well, it is. And And the reason I brought up the Acon Digital show was that, we were having an exchange about it, and I'm laughing just how shit the generative AI was in creating music, right?
At the time,
right? And within 2 weeks, out come all of those, the AI-generated remixes of songs where they've actually had 2 rap artists. I can't remember their name. I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of.
Well, there was the Eminem voice deepfake.
No, it wasn't that one. There was these 2, Dr. Dre and someone else maybe. There was these 2 major signed rap artists that are on completely different labels that have never collaborated together. And someone has actually written a song, and I'm going to make that point, right? So they've written an original song, and then they've put a guide vocal down, and then they've had, using the AI algorithm, is that they've changed the vocals. And so there's like a bit of an exchange between the 2 vocal parts, right? And they've generated one as one rapper and one as the other, and then everyone lost their minds, right? Because they're going, fuck, and even people are saying, hey, you should get whoever wrote the song to write some songs for you because it's actually better than some of their original stuff. I have no opinion on any of that because I don't know, right? But I listened to it. I went, I don't know because I'm not familiar with these artists, right? But then someone did an Oasis one. And again, I'm not a huge Oasis fan, but I'm very, very familiar with their music and their tonality and stuff. And that one was pretty full on, right? But again, and I'm going to make this point, right? The music was not AI generated. The music was actually written, created, produced, recorded by a human, right? And then they changed the vocal textures, right, to make it sound like Oasis. So the question is, how long is it going to be before the music starts getting generated, all right, to a point where you're not going to be able to tell? I don't think we're there just yet, or are we?
No, we are.
We are?
I've seen some examples. Yeah, I've seen some examples already of some of this stuff out there. I don't know. There are 2 different ways I could look at this, and I'd be interested in Chris's take on it too. But there's oh God, the sky's falling. Like
Chicken Little.
Everything's got to be fake in the future. Blah blah blah. That's one way to look at it, and that's when you get laws passed that are not very helpful. And the other way is just musicians are always going to find ways to be creative within the suite of tools that they have available to them at the time. The orchestral folks were scared of synthesizers way back in the 60s.
Yes.
They thought that was going to be the end of the world there. This is quite different from that. There are things that need to be solved, but I think it's going to become another tool that they use, and that's that.
Chris, got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I sort of agree with Pete a little bit. I think it can be a tool. It can also backfire a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, we're already seeing musicians trying to fight things like the online streaming services by not getting a lot of the revenue they normally would because the studios are making deals that maybe they shouldn't. So there does need to be some thought behind it and put into a place where it can be useful, not just left alone. I don't think it can be ignored because once you ignore it, then yes, people will just do whatever they like and put it online and no one will know. So we do need to be a little bit careful with it. But it is it any different to the sync button on a DJ deck? I mean, everyone was scared of that too, but it can be a creative tool for getting your music synced together as well. So I do agree with Pete. I think it can be one or the other. We're just got to wait and see.
Yeah.
I will add that the place where this gets really messy is, and we've seen this in the visual art world for a while, where the way AI works is it learns, right? It doesn't keep copies of things. Like folks have this thought that when they use AI generated imagery, that it's somehow kept a copy of some artist's work, but it doesn't. It's actually learned how to replicate it, which is a subtle difference and lets people skirt copyright laws as they are today.
Yep.
Because you're not actually keeping a copy of it. And so what's happened in the visual arts is that you'll say, generate some artwork in the style of so-and-so, and you'll have a long prompt about it. And that person's art, which was used in the training data, usually without their permission, like the generated version is doing things like showing something very close to their signature because it was part of the training data and really emulating their style. And that's when it starts getting a little like uncomfortable for me, where there needs to be an opt-in process and artists need to somehow.
It's almost stealing their technique.
Yeah, like it's really it is like somebody going and stealing your technique, but since it's so easy and anybody can do it just by using this online stuff, it becomes really prevalent. So something does need to be done about that. I just don't trust the governments to do anything appropriate about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I meant by the generative AI. There was a good video commentary from he's an engineer producer in America, and again, forgive me because I don't follow him usually, but he had some really interesting things to say about that whole generative AI and how it was going to start impacting copyrights and the streaming services and that type of area. And his vision, the worst case scenario was that the AI was going to become that advanced that it could easily produce a song in the style of fill in the blank, all right? Everything, all the instruments, the vocal stylings, and then the streaming services could actually use this generative AI to create songs in that particular style. And then they no longer have to deal with the artist because they're just sitting there and generating this stuff from scratch in a particular style. So you've got a playlist in this style, a playlist in this style, and they own it because they've used generative AI to actually create it, and the artist gets shafted a second time, all right? I don't think we're there yet, right?
Yeah, but that's pretty uncool, though.
But I could see it happening.
It's got to go there, though.
I could see it happening,
So not just musicians, but think like if you're a voice artist, let's say, so my kids love anime. I like anime. Like you're a voice artist that does an anime voice for a show, and you go to renegotiate your contract for this famous character, and it's really popular, and you want to get paid more for doing that voice. Well, the studio technically owns that character. Do they own your voice of that character? Well, they can bring somebody else in to imitate you. Well, could they train AI to imitate you? And then you're no longer needed. Like that stuff is very possible today.
Yeah. And look, even the intro voiceover for the show is done by a good friend of mine, Andrew Peters, who's a professional voiceover artist. And they've got an awesome podcast as well called the Pro Audio Suite, and he was the guy that actually dragged me onto the podcast for the first time and got me started in this whole mess, so thanks very much, Andrew. But they did a show recently where they were actually showing the AI generative voice emulation stuff, and the person that was doing the test to show them took a print of Andrew's voice, all right? It's very, very distinct. Took a print of Andrew's voice, and then he had some text written out, and then he basically got this AI to read out the script. It was a little choppy, but you know what? It was close enough to go shit. All right. Yep. And I mean, Andrew's listening to this AI basically reading back a script with his voice, and he's going, yeah. I mean, it wasn't 100% there. There was some slight inflections and stuff that weren't quite there, but I mean, we're only at the start of it. All right.
Yeah.
So he's saying, well, how do I copyright my voice? Well, can you?
Yep. Yeah. That's the part that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
And who owns that voice? If you paid him to do a voiceover for something, you got to check, like the contracts today often don't cover that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, you never would have thought, I can actually duplicate your voice and just type in something and I can use your AI voice to read out the rest of my scripts. Thanks very much for coming. That one's an interesting one.
If anybody ever asks you to record yourself reading like a chapter from a specific book or something like that, just say no, because they're just trying to get training data from you.
Yeah, from me. Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So let's see how many different ways we can get an AI to pronounce Maryland from your voice.
Maryland, Melbourne.
Melbourne.
There you go. I reckon we should move on to the CPU wars. And so there's been some interesting developments since the last time we spoke. Now, the Xeon W platform is the big one, but I'll leave that one till last. So a couple of things. Mac Studio and Pro. Now, we were already discussing this, if you remember, Chris, because we were saying, hey, Mac Pro, first we were going, is there ever going to be one? Or how long, why are they delaying replacing the Intel Mac Pro? And then on another show we're going, oh, look, they still haven't done it, but it's coming because we heard some rumors. But then we heard the rumors that they were trying to stitch together a couple of more chips on the die, right? So, you've got between the Max and the Ultra, there's basically two chips stuck together, right? So 10 core and then you've got a 20 core. These we're talking performance cores, not the little cores, right? So we were thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen with the Mac Pro? Because they're going to have to go up. And the rumor mill was saying, well, they attempted to stitch, I can't remember whether it was 3 or 4, and it just didn't work. They abandoned the whole idea. So if you remember, we're thinking, well, what's the Mac Pro going to be? Is it going to be just like a studio with some PCIe slots? Bingo. Guess what? Out comes the Mac Pro, which is a Mac Studio with PCIe slots. And did you see what the start price is here in Australia, Chris?
$11,999.
There you go. Point of entry, $12,000. Now, that same machine in the Mac Studio, 64 gigabyte of RAM with the Ultra is, I think,
$65.99.
There you go. So you're paying $5,500 for some PCIe slots, and the Mac fraternity they're almost wetting themselves. Whoa, hey, this is awesome. Is it? $12,000 entry point for a Mac Studio with some PCIe slots. Okay, well, I mean, if you require that and you're in that. You're basically under the influence of the RDF, the Apple reality distortion field, knock yourself out. That's an amazing type of release. But I don't know. I mean, you'd be better to know whether the Mac fraternity are actually falling over themselves to buy these things, Chris. Have you been picking up any?
Yeah, look, I was having obviously I watched the whole thing a few weeks back. It's only a pretty new thing, this announcement. But what's really interesting about this entire lineup now is that it's really come together. If you list all the machines that are for sale, you'll see now that there's very little M1 left. It's really only, everything's M2. Max or Ultra, but the really interesting thing about the Mac Pro is that it only comes in a 24-core CPU. You can't get one lower. Where before you could buy the 8-core or the 1012 Intel, but you can't put any graphics cards in there. You can't put any MPX cards in there from previously, and you can't use the Afterburner card in it. So a lot of the performance tests that they've been running have literally been without GPUs on board, and the higher spec one is showing the ability to go to 76-core GPU with 32 neutral cores as well. So there's a ton of processing. The guys that I see online that are absolutely fizzing are the video renderers, the 3D renderers, and the animation guys, because they're really the only ones that need this kind of grunt, and also possibly the only ones that need the PCI slots, because you've got 7 slots in these machines, but you can't put a graphics card in there. It sort of seems a bit weird. And 6 of those are Gen 4 slots. So you could put SSD cards in there that you could literally do 26, gig a second off those hard drives. So for those rendering animation guys, this is absolutely the bee's knees. The rendering speeds are man, they seem to be 6 to 7 times faster than previous.
No, but just let me just say one thing though, right? If we take away the PCIe slots, right? So forget about, because the only thing you can jam in there is, like you said, is like maybe some storage expansion stuff, right? Well, there's probably more, but obviously you can fit Pro Tools HDX cards and RME cards and whatever else, right? On the audio side, but for those guys, for the video renderers, right? What's the difference between the Mac Studio with the 24 core and the Mac Pro with the 24 core? What's the difference?
Nothing. It's the same CPU. It's the same ability to render, but
right. So, but this is my point. So, why would those animation guys be falling over themselves to buy a Mac Pro when they've already got all that processing power in the studio?
Because they need the storage. I mean, so when you render a large animation or a large video transcode, part of it is also how fast your hard drives can go. And obviously on the PCI slots, they're going to get far better speed. But I'm with you. I don't think this really has much of a future. I think there will probably be, I can't see them doing another one because people are going to go, well, what the hell am I going to put in these 7 PCI slots?
Yeah. So, but in regard to the storage though, right, the Apple storage, this is where I get really confused. So are they running M2 Gen 4 and 5, or what are they running? What's the connectivity for the additional storage?
So there's 7 slots in these new machines?
No, I'm talking about even just Apple Silicon in general, right? So what is the storage that is actually...
So this is part of the problem. So in a Mac Studio, there's very limited amount of internal storage. It's very fast, but it's only 1 to 2 terabytes internally on the machine.
You can't put anything additional?
Only via Thunderbolt.
Oh, what the fuck? Sorry. What? Really?
Yeah, but that's always been the case. I mean, that's kind of how it goes. I mean,
you can't even open it up and put an additional M2 Gen 4 or 5.
No, not unless you have the Mac Pro.
And then with the Mac Pro, how do you do it?
You'd have to do it on a PCI card and use like a SSD RAID.
So there still isn't any additional storage native to that machine unless you actually add an additional PCIe storage controller.
There's storage internally, but it's limited.
But is there storage expandability? No.
No, not internally on the board, no.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Just let me line up for that one. Okay. All right.
So the thing about that, right, is that what you do get internally is lightning fast. So when you look at a lot of these tests that are done and a lot of these figures that are generated, they're usually generated on files that are really small, but on those internal drives, which are blistering because we know they're literally attached to the CPU, GPU core chip, right?
It's a SoC. It's a system on a chip. That's why the memory bandwidth is just like
it's
through
huge.
The roof. Yeah, of course.
800 megabyte on these new machines, the internal memory. But when you need external additional storage, it's either via Thunderbolt RAID or on an Intel Mac, you could still use a SATA ports, but you can't get close enough to go directly on that board like you can't with the Studio or the Minis.
That just blows me away that we've got the technology advancements in those M2 PCIe, Gen 4 and 5 space, and we're up to the Gen 4s. I think. I mean, this is all. We're just throwing numbers around, but 7.6 gigabyte a second, right? I mean, we audio guys are not going to get anywhere near saturating that stuff, but I think, your video guys can probably, tickle that.
These Mac Pros are not for audio people. I mean, even if you had unlimited amount of budget, there's almost no benefit. The Studio is better value, honestly, for a lot of processing, but it actually does lead a little bit to what we were talking about before with the GPU audio, where you do have a lot of massive processing power that's not being used by DAWs. If somebody cracks that somehow, then suddenly we're talking about an abundance amount of, 76 cores of GPU in this Mac Pro. Well, if I could line up 700 plugins on that, maybe I would. But at the moment, I've still got the same problem, right? I overload one core out of the 24 and crackle, pop.
Yep.
So it is a bit of an interesting thing.
Yeah. So that's so look with the Mac stuff, the M2, the report. I haven't had a chance to get in front of one, and it's just more and more difficult to try and actually approach anyone within that Apple community to actually do any of our specific tests, because if it doesn't fare well, they're not going to report it back. So that's always been the frustration for me, just finding people that are actually willing.
I think we'll know in the next couple of months because this is very new. I mean, these machines have only just dropped.
Well, they're saying 15 up to 50. Best case scenario is 15 to 20%, right, in IPC. So that's where we're at. But like I was reading in some of the some of the pigeon chest that was flying on some of the forums this morning before we came on, just laughing my head off, right? And, oh, mate, it's 50% improvement over the M1. I'm going, where the hell are they pulling? They're just pulling this stuff out of their ass, right? 50%. There's no way you got a 50% performance improvement. At best case scenario, I'd say around a 15%, which is good, right? And that's pretty much the same type of gains that we get on the x86 side, right? So, look, there is definitely a resurgence going back to the Mac, right, within the audio community. I can feel it. I can feel it at the business level as well. We can probably discuss that a little bit more a little bit later. So, because I do want to get to the main point with this whole CPU release environment over the last 6 months or so.
So just before you do,
Yes.
just one more thing.
Yes.
People do need to be careful when they look at this marketing stuff from Apple. I mean, I love Apple and I love Intel and I've got plenty of computers, right? But the one where I looked the other day, they were comparing the Intel Mac Pros to the M2 Ultra, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the comparisons were not with the 24 or 20 core Intel machines. They were like with the 8 core Intel machines.
Well, of course.
Comparing against the 24 core, and you're going, it's 7 times faster. And it's like, well, duh. It probably is. So when you are looking at that and what gains you may get, just have a bit of just be careful that you are comparing apples with apples, because, you don't want to see an 8% increase only to realize that maybe your 8% increase really isn't there. So it is, do be careful with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and look, and this is something that I always try and focus on when I'm doing the cross-platform stuff with the Apple machines, and the reason I don't do the testing is because the peanut gallery would lose their minds if I did the Apple testing, because they'd say, oh, this guy's just going to be blurring all the numbers. So I always use independent Mac users to actually do the testing for me. And again, that's the difficulty, because they're not exactly falling over themselves to come forward to kind of help me with this stuff. But that's okay. I mean, I've got I may have access to an M2 Mac Studio. Actually, no, I will have access to it, but I don't know whether it's a 10 or a 20 core, or 24 core, right? So a 12 or 24. I don't know which one it is yet, but I will get in front of an M2 at some point, and I will actually do the testing. And if everyone wants to bitch about it, well, kiss my ass. Doesn't matter.
The M2 Max on the Mac Studio entry level, which is a lot cheaper, like the $3,000 AUD mark, is the interesting one, the 12 core, because it is affordable. So that one is probably a, interesting one to see how that fares up against some of the other tests that have already been done.
Well, it might well be that's exactly what I'm going to be testing. So I don't know. All right, I'll cross that bridge if and when I get to it. Now I do want to move to the Intel W2400 or the W790 W2400/3400 series. This is something that we have discussed numerous times over the shows. It is something that I have been waiting for. There's been a delay of about 2 years for this platform. It was supposed to be this time last year. It was supposed to be, middle of last year. Then it was supposed to be October, and then it was supposed to be December. And they finally released it just after we did our show, right? So the official release, NDA lifting and everything else, is February 15, right? I'm thinking, cool, right? So I've got all this information, and I'm waiting for all the official reviews from all of the fill-in blank here, right? Whether it's the YouTube talking head tech sites, or whether it's actually the print, online computer review sites, and they're not coming. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's interesting. And then so that release there was a few strange things about the release. The first one was that they weren't releasing any of the pricing. So they announced them on February 15. They weren't announcing the pricing. I've gone, what? Why would they be announcing the pricing? It was very limited information on motherboards, coolers, all the rest of it. So it gets to like middle of March, they finally released the pricing, and that was the first kick in the guts, because the W2400 was supposed to be the X299 replacement, right? The W3400 was the higher end modular. So there's two chips, right? Well, the W2400 is a monolithic die, 12 to 24 core. This is the exact X299 HEDT replacement, right? That's always what they've said it was. And then the W3400 is a modular design. It's got actually 4 chiplets, so they've gone, the AMD route. They've got 4 chiplets up to 56 core. But these are completely different dies, right? Now, the problem was always going to be, for me, and the alarm bell started ringing when the W790 chipset was actually going to be supporting both. I'm thinking, hang on, how is that going to work, right? Because they're completely different target markets. And the X299 was always something that we used in the audio field because the clocking was always quite good with it. We could get a whole stack of bias options in far as power, the power stuff on the chips. And the power and clocking on the chips was always something that we could really finely tune on these. And the clocking was higher, and the all-core turbo was actually quite healthy on these, right? So this was good with the HEDT X299. Okay, we had all the benefits of the extra additional PCIe lanes, the additional memory, the wider memory bandwidth with the 4-channel memory. So all of that tick, tick, tick. W790 had all those ticks, right? We were going to 4-channel DDR5. We had more PCIe lanes. We had 12 to 24 core, and I won't talk about W3400 because it's not really of any interest to us. But the W2400, 12 to 24 core, up to, and this is the initial spec, and I've got all the training documents and all the official releases and stuff, up to 4.6 or 4.8 gigahertz. I said, these things are going to be killer, right? On paper, right? And so they had a newer architecture, increased IPC, and I've discovered that the IPC is actually a couple of generations behind the 13th gen. So I think it might be 12th gen, somewhere around there, the IPC. So it's not quite as high as the 13th gen. But we had 24 performance cores, up to 24 performance cores, no E-core, shenanigans. And I couldn't get a hold of anything in Australia. And so luckily, Pete over at Scan has access to this advanced stuff. So he managed to get some chips, CPUs. He got a 16, a 20, and a 24 core, and he got both of the Asus motherboards, but we're focusing on one called the Ace, right, which is 4-channel memory designed specifically for the W2400, right, where the other one's called the Sage, which is an 8-channel memory board, which is specifically designed for 3400. Now, here lies the problem, all right, and my fears were realized that because of the same chipset, that they merged the two chip architectures onto that same chipset, right? In the past, what we regard as HEDT X299 was a completely different chipset to the Xeon, right? Chipset, which are far more conservative when it comes to clocking and power profiling and stuff. So the alarm bells for me was, hang on, how could they merge these two completely different design architectures, one being monolithic, one being modular, right, onto the same chip? There's got to be some really odd clocking profiles unless they're very, very specific with the clocking profile. So, Pete got a hold of them, and I'm helping him doing some R&D via proxy, obviously, because he's in front of it. And the alarm bells are going off really early, right, because these things were not clocking anywhere near what we were expecting. So the all-core turbos, instead of being in that 4.6 to 4.8 range, we were looking at 3 to 3.5 gigahertz, right? And we're like, what the fuck is going on here? And the other thing that we have actually become made public, but we were kind of keeping it quiet for a while, was that these things were actually shutting themselves down under any type of load, right? Any moderate load. So say 16 core machine, I can't remember how much memory. There might have been 64 gigabyte of memory in it. It was just a small quadra card in there, so it wasn't pulling, the graphics card wasn't pulling any power. Pete started the machine. I think the initial build, he just had an 850 power supply around. We're thinking, hey, 16 core, small graphics card, very minimal storage, right? It was all M2 storage. And that system, it would fire up and land on the desktop, but he'd open up the Reaper DAWbench session, he'd press play and the thing would shut down. Not restart, shut down, all right? And we're thinking, what the hell's happening there? And then he went up to a 1,050 watt power supply, and he got to about, I think, 70% load, and it shut itself down again. We're thinking, what is going on here, all right? And so there's some really weird power profiling going on with these machines. What we worked out was that, because we started measuring power draw, total power draw on these machines, right? And if we talk the 24-core machine at full tilt was pulling 500 watts max, right? The whole machine, not the chip, the whole machine. If it didn't have any, if anything below a 1,200 watt power supply was shutting down. So it looked like what we figured out was that you had to have at least 700 watt overhead on the power supply of what the machine was pulling, or it would shut itself down. I mean, that's catastrophic, right? So, and this is even before we started getting into the clocking side of it, because we had to actually address the clocking side. And we approached both ASUS and Intel, both from each side of the pond here, and we're trying to get some type of clarification of why the all-core turbos were so low. And then I went back to my training documents and all of the release documents, and sure enough, they never listed all-core turbo. They listed the base clock and they listed the top turbo bin, but the all-core turbo was ominously missing. I didn't pick it up on the first time. So they knew there was a problem there, right? Everyone's crossing their arms going, no, that's it. That's the best you're going to get. We're going, what are you talking about? 24 core was getting up to 3 gigahertz all-core turbo. And we're looking at this going, this is ridiculous. So Pete did all of his DAWbench testing, and I said, don't release this stuff. Seriously, don't release it, because the i9 3900K and the 7950 were handing its ass to the whole lot of them, right? And I'm thinking, don't release this. There is something wrong here, right? But, Pete was getting pressure from some other side, and of course, so he released this, all of the results. Now, I'll make a point. There was still no, what I would call official reviews and benchmarks that had hit the web. None, right? Puget Systems had done a preliminary one, and Puget Systems was a Intel release partner for the W series, right? You can go read them. I mean, they're just an absolute fluff piece. And they were doing an Apple thing, Chris, where they were going, oh, look, we're comparing it to the previous Xeon, right? I'm going, yep. And then they'd have a token. Seriously, it was kind of pretty funny. You go check them out. There's a token 13900K that they've actually thrown in the testing with the charts, and the 13900K is literally handing those new Xeons their ass, right? But they never mentioned it in the text of like going, come on. I mean, there's an elephant in the room here. We have a problem, right? So fast forward probably about a week or so, and I was contacted, or actually I was given some information on one of my forum threads by a guy that pointed me towards an overclocker that Intel had given some advanced stuff to. And I'll get this right now because I got it wrong in the last podcast. A guy called Scatterbencher. So you can look it up. Just go Scatterbencher Xeon W2400 overclocking article. Very, very detailed. And so I'm reading this, and the guy on the forum said, he goes, Vin, I don't know why you guys are having so much trouble with this all-core turbo, because a Scatterbencher just, there's a setting in the BIOS where it's just a preset, and it moves the all-core turbos on the 24-core up to 4.4 gigahertz. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So I read the article, noted the setting, sent it to Pete going, can you get into the BIOS? It was just this hidden setting, completely undocumented. ASUS don't even admit that it's even in there. They refuse to even acknowledge that this setting is in there. And it's hidden under this sub-menu, and it's, what was it? It was titled, wait for it, ready? Water cooling overclocking profile, right? And we're like, well, firstly, we didn't need water cooling because these things are barely breaking 60 degrees, right? And an overclocking profile. So, but what this profile did is that it left the base clock, right, completely alone. It left the base clock completely alone, and all it did is it tweaked the turbo profiles to allow and unlock the true all-core turbo potential of these chips, right? But it's just this hidden setting. This should be the standard setting, guys, right? So Pete runs this up. All of a sudden, these things spring to life. They're running in the mid-4s. He redoes the tests. They perform, obviously, a lot better. But just to cut a long story short, and people can read the reports, and I've done a whole summary of on my Facebook page and also on the Gearspace thread, is that the reality of all of this is even when we unlock the all-core turbo is that if we went core to core, closest thing core to core was the 2465X, which is the 16-core, all performance cores running at 4.4 gigahertz, up against the 13900K, which is 8 performance cores and 16 E-cores. We'll call them E-cores, right? I'll call them middle cores. Or the 7950X AMD, there is barely single point percentage performance improvements, right? And you think, well, that's an improvement. And then the 20 and 24 core kind of scaled a little bit better, right? Depending on core count. It didn't deliver anywhere near what we were expecting. So the IPC was not what we were expecting. That was one. Two, the overclocking is unofficial, right? And if we keep pushing ASUS, there might be a chance that they actually pull that setting, right? So then it goes back to the 3 gigahertz, right? And we still have this massive problem with the machines shutting themselves down, right? And then we were digging through the manual and someone highlighted the fact that ASUS are specifying, wait for this one, minimum on a W2400 system, and remember they start at 12 core, is 1500 watts. And the other odd thing with that motherboard is that there's dual power rails and they specify 1500 watts or dual 750. I'm like, what? So there's obviously some weird design quirk with that motherboard. If you're running a single power supply in that power rail, if you don't have, and this is what we discovered, if you don't have at least 700 watt power overhead, there's a power cut on that board. Now, I don't know, Pete and Chris, we've been around computers a long time. That sounds like a design flaw to me.
I wonder if it's an issue with some power supplies won't, like they'll have 2 rails, but they don't equally distribute, like there's a maximum wattage per rail. And I wonder if they're hitting what you just said a second ago, which is minimum of 700 something watts per rail. And that's what's doing it.
No, but it needs, maybe. But that still doesn't make any sense. And the thing is that Supermicro and ASRock have released motherboards for these Xeon 2400s as well, and the 3400s, right? Yeah. And there's a single power rail. Supermicro have also released, integrated systems, complete systems. For the W2400, the power supply is 1200 watt, all right?
Yep.
For the W3400, it's... I'm laughing. It's 2,000 watt, right? But there is something that is not quite gelling, right? And the other major and significant problem for me is that where they've actually priced these. Now, this is the problem that when they killed off the X series, as soon as they killed off that HEDT X series, now, just to be clear, that has been my primary platform for high-end digital audio workstations since 2008, right? I've had a 15-year run of Intel HEDT, X58, X79, X99, X299. And now every one of those platform releases were 3 years apart. So X58 was 2008 to 2011, X79 was 2011, 2014, X99 was 2014, 2017, and then X99 ran 5 years. Actually, they still have only just announced that they're still manufacturing the chips. You can't buy a motherboard, but that's 5 years, right? If we go to the end of 2022, they were 2 years overdue, and they, we've been hearing about this X299 replacement since the end of 2020, which was when it was due, right? And I'm hearing X399, X599, all of these things were actually in the works, because talking to Tom over at Broken Silicon, he was saying, yep, they were definitely on the board, and there was talks about an X299 or this monolithic W series going into a different socket. It wasn't going into the same socket and chipset as the W790 or the W3400, how it eventuated. So there was talk of this thing being a totally separate thing and an X299 replacement, which would have been perfect. Because they've merged the two, I've got a term where I've said that they're going to Xeon this thing. I'm sure they're going to Xeon it, and they did, right? So the pricing the CPU pricing came in at about double what we were expecting. The motherboards came in at 3 times. So just to give you an example, if you buy a motherboard and a CPU with the W790, if you do a motherboard and CPU, top end, 13900K, and a Z790 board, and the same with the Ryzen 7950 and appropriate board, right? You're looking in Australia, just the CPU and the board is under $1,300, right? Now, to get the comparative performance on the W790, you're needing to go to the W2465X. You also have to run the non-official all-core turbo unlocking, right? And that's $4,300, right? So you got a $3,000 variance for single point performance improvements. That's a hard sell in anyone's book, all right? So this is literally, I've actually priced systems up, even though I will tell you straight up, no CPUs have hit the country. The motherboards have. There's no CPUs, right? Have not, still not. And they will only special order them. But I've priced them up, and the base 12-core machine comes in at $7,200. So by the time we get to the 16-core, which is comparative to my 7950, 13900K machines, it's $8,000, and those other machines with 64 gigabyte of RAM with exactly the same storage, right, is $4,000. So how do I approach this? How do I sit there and say, okay, I'm going to try and promote these new Xeon machines to have the equivalent performance of these $4,000 machines? You need to spend $8,000, and what are we gaining? We're gaining some single point performance advantage, right? I mean, it's just ludicrous. So this is where I'm at. We still don't have any CPUs. And then we find out that Intel pulled the supply of the CPUs because there's some errata. There's some reported errata on the monolithic die where they pulled the whole line, which apparently they've fixed. Now, we don't know whether it's a BIOS change or whether it's a chip change. I reckon it's a stepping chip change because there's no chips in the market, right? And so still waiting for stock. My phone is not ringing off the hook from clients that have been waiting for those replacement machines because the X299 machine was floating around that $4,500 mark for that type of spec, and now it's bumped up to 7 to 8. I don't know. What thoughts, guys? I mean, is it just me kind of going, well, that's just the nature of the beast, or have Intel completely screwed this HEDT relaunch or replacement?
The problem with the Xeon brand is the minute you throw it on there, everything costs twice as much, right? So that's what you're finding out.
Yeah, but you know what X series stood for? X series. X series was a Xeon without ECC RAM. It was a Xeon platform. That's exactly what it was.
Right, but it didn't have the Xeon name, so it didn't, so it didn't have to carry that tax with it.
Yep.
I don't know. Like I would have thought that the Xeon would have had like faster memory throughput or, better access to the bus or more PCIe lanes or something really compelling about it. But man, for twice the price, I don't know. I've been waiting for something. I'm still running my i9 9900 here because I've been waiting for the replacement for it. And I still haven't seen a good replacement.
No. So, Chris, you got any thoughts on this one?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like something's gone horribly wrong. Someone's made some decisions that weren't right or something. I don't know. It's very hard to justify double the price on something where you're not getting at least a 25 to 30% improvement.
You probably need more than 25% improvement for double the price.
That's a minimum.
Right, yeah.
At least. Yeah. Not a single digit improvement.
Chris is a cheap date. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And the thing is, Chris, is that you're going up against this 13900K with a hybrid, right? So you've got, and we just say the 2465X, so that's the 16 core. So forget about the 20 and 24 core because the prices of those, if you think that the 16 core is expensive, forget that because the 24 core is over $4,000 just for the CPU, right? You can't scale the performance improvements between the 16 and 24 core and add another $2,000.
No.
It isn't there, right? And yeah, I'm kind of almost at loss for words for this because I think I kind of blew my wad on that other podcast. I kind of spoke for nearly 2 hours on it, trying to get some type of clarity to see whether anyone else had been experiencing that, and other people had been saying, "Oh, you're not on an island." Yes, right. So if the pricing wasn't bad enough, right? Because the motherboard, I didn't even mention the motherboard pricing, right? The entry motherboard pricing is $1,800. In Australia. The Ace motherboard is $1,800, all right? So it's like, and the Sage board, which is the 8-channel W3400 one, wait for this one, $2,700. I've never seen a motherboard worth $2,700.
But you can't get them, right?
They're there. Yeah,
you can order them?
Yeah, but who's going to buy them, right? No, you can't get the chip, right? But who's going to buy a $2,800 motherboard, really, right? Well, I know who's actually put some orders in for these new W2400 series machines, right? Because I've got some good contacts in outside of the audio industry, but people that actually build larger workstations for government and scientific purposes and that type of stuff. The only people that have ordered these machines is a government agency, which I won't name because that won't be fair. But the only reason that they've ordered these machines is because the IT department just crossed their arms and going, well, that has to be Intel, right? So they are going to move some of these machines. It's not going to go into workstation areas, audio workstation areas. I can't see it. I just can't justify it. And the frustrating thing for me is that I've got clients waiting for these machines to replace their early X299 systems. I mean, I've got nothing to offer them, and it's not a lot of clients. But I mean, if you've got multiple PCIe, so let's just say multiple RME PCIe cards in the machine and multiple DSP cards, and I've got some clients that have got that configuration that need the HEDT PCIe lanes, right? What am I going to sell them? Right?
Suddenly an over-expensive Mac Pro looks like a not a bad option.
Yeah, really? Yeah. What's the guarantee that UAD is going to work on a Mac Pro? Go on, you be the first one to kind of test that one, all right?
Oh, the RME cards will work.
Yeah. Will the UAD? No, I don't think so, right? And so...
much power, just run them natively.
Yeah. I'm saying I've got these... small number of clients that require these, they love their UADs, and you'll be prying them out of their dying hands, Chris, right? So this is the problem. But the other thing that seems to have happened is that the whole thing it seems to have stalled because of it, right? I have moved a number of my clients that were waiting for the X299 replacements to W790 and 7950 machines, right? Not W790, sorry, 13900K and 7950X machines, and they're kicking ass. Now, some of these guys were coming in out of the cold after, 10 years. So they're going, how much more power have I got? And I'm laughing my head off going, I can't even graph it, how much more power they've got. They're very, very happy, and they're fine. They're just going to put their heads down and work for another 5, 7, probably 10 years, even with those 13900 machines, right? They didn't have the requirement of the PCIe lanes, right? They one of them actually, I did have to run a higher end. We didn't run the IGP. We actually ran a quadricard because he needed 4K monitors, right? So, I mean, there's that option there. If I can run the quadricards if we need a higher number of LCD outputs.
There's still a lot of animators, 3D renderers still needing this level of spec.
Well, where do you go?
On a Windows platform.
Where do you go?
Well,
right? Threadripper Pro.
Same boat. Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah.
So that's what Intel have done with this one, right? So it's a missed opportunity. W2400, W3400. One's a monolithic die. The W3400 goes head to head against Threadripper Pro, right? And it's priced accordingly because AMD, anytime AMD get any type of a technical advantage, they actually get very, very cocky and they price the stuff through the roof, right? So Intel, they probably had their bean counters looking there going, okay, where are we going to price this stuff? And they looked at the Threadripper Pro, which is the only other HEDT platform, because AMD dropped their standard Threadripper, right? And this is another bone of contention because they may bring it back. There was rumours of that they were going to bring in, and I actually was sent questionnaires, right, from AMD, from one of my major suppliers saying, hey, what do you reckon here? They're actually asking what our thoughts on is the market going to actually cater for a HEDT platform below Threadripper Pro? Duh. Right? So they were thinking of bringing back the standard Threadripper, depending on how this W2400 performed, right? And instead, Intel have completely misread the room, have gone, no, we're going to price the W2400 at the Threadripper Pro price, and we're going to price the W3400 at even above the Threadripper Pro price, and then not deliver on performance. And then have this absolute clusterfuck of a release where there is still, right, 5 months after the release, there is still not one official review out there. Not one, right? What is that telling us, right? How can you have a product that the NDA lifted in February 15, and here we are, and today is July 25th/26th, right? And there is not one official review out there, apart from the scan audio stuff that he's done and the Puget fluff piece, right? And there's some odd YouTube guys that have managed to pull together enough money to get a motherboard and a chip and do some kind of reviews and overclocking. But there is no official reviews. So
maybe they'll drop the price.
Well,
I mean,
Well, here's the even more ridiculous thing, right? Well, one, they pulled all the parts out of the channel, right, because of this errata. Wait for this one. They're already talking about a refresh. I'm like, a refresh? Yeah, you're talking about a CPU refresh for a platform that hasn't even seen the light of day, literally, apart from just some random sample bloody chips floating around. Apparently, some of the bigger manufacturers like HP and Dells and Lenovo's, they've been getting some supply of the stuff, right? But anyone below that, no, it's just it hasn't been in the channel. So to say that this release, long overdue release, has been a disappointment is an understatement. It actually has affected my business a great deal, and I'm quite concerned because I've just felt there has been I'm feeling a shift away from the Windows DAW platform, and this didn't help, So W2400 Intel whoever made those decisions, I won't say I'll buy you a beer. I'd like to give you a slap in the side of the head, actually. But we'll see how that eventuates with the refresh. I think it's too late. I think the platform's already dead. But we'll see where that lands. I think I've had enough. I've had enough of the Xeon. I'm kind of almost giving myself a headache even just discussing it again.
Yeah, might have to put that one down as a bit strange.
Yeah, well, it's not a bit strange.
Hopefully the refresh fixes it.
Yeah, it's a complete screw up. It's a complete fail, right? As far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much, Intel. just quickly, we'll just move on to some of the other CPU architecture stuff. There's not really a lot happening with those. The Intel hybrid, there is a refresh. There is definitely a refresh coming in a couple of months. Raptor Lake refresh. That's going to be named the 14th gen. Mate, is just basically they're just polishing the turd a bit, right? You know, the 14900K is exactly the same performance in E-cores. I think they're going up 200 megahertz. Just don't get too excited, guys. There's going to be an extra 200 megahertz, right? And that no IPC, or if there is IPC, very minor IPC improvements, and basically an extra 200 megahertz in clock speed. Look out! And that somehow manages to be an extra generation. I think they're going to, in the smaller one, 13700, I think they're going to add an additional 4 economy cores. So, 8 and 12 instead of 8 and 8. Mate, I could go on about what I think about this whole hybrid architecture. Intel have actually committed to this thing with the failure of the Xeon platform, and it is a failure, and this insistence on maintaining these hybrid chips. I'm really concerned for Intel, probably for the first time in probably 20 years that I'm really concerned with where they're going. But we'll see how it all lands in the next 12 months or so. AMD are just going to put their head down and with that Zen architecture, they've got it all down. They've got that little chiplet design. They can just sit there and knock these out far easier than a monolithic type of thing. And they're not dealing with E-cores yet. I heard a rumor that they may be, right? But I don't, So that's pretty much it. And the only other thing that I can really bring up with these high-end enthusiast level CPUs is that because they're essentially got themselves into a what I call a megahertz war, right? The clocking wars, is that they're pushing these chips to the absolute extremes, and there was a bit of an issue with quite a few AMD enthusiasts blowing holes through the middle of their 7000 series Ryzens. I don't know if you're following any of that, but the motherboard manufacturers were taking some additional liberties in regards to power profiles and clocking, and they were literally blowing a hole through these CPUs. And then one of the manufacturers, which I won't name, but one of the manufacturers decided to, acknowledge, yep, we've got a problem here. Here's a beta BIOS that should resolve it, but if you blow a hole through your chip, it's not covered by warranty. I'm like, what? Look, I mean, CPU, x86 CPU versus Apple Silicon is going to be the next battleground. I haven't got too much to add there until I get in front of an M2. Then we know where the bodies are buried with that one. I think that's it. I think we can move on from the CPU stuff, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we need to positive up a bit.
Positive up. Okay.
Yeah.
Windows 11. That's positive. Windows 11. I've just got a few things. For me, where are we with Windows 11, Pete? Because we're 18 months? No. How far in are we? 12 months? 18 months?
Yeah, something like that. Sorry, I don't remember the exact release date off the top of my head.
Okay. So with me, with Windows 11, I've already voiced my concerns about, for me, it feels a little bit unfinished. And it's more in that kind of taskbar area. And the user UI. And I'm not the only one on an island. I mean, I've been seeing some articles on some of the more traditional tech sites that are usually really supportive of the Windows releases, where they're starting to write articles going, you know what, here's a way of actually circumnavigating that taskbar area, And when I saw that, I've gone, okay, so I'm not on an island. There are people that are generally disliking the direction that the user experience has gone. All right, that's the best way for me to explain it. I mean, I'm sitting in front of my Windows 11 machine here, and I can tell you that the taskbar looks like a Windows 10 because I've made those changes, and you're aware of that, Pete. But I don't want to make those changes because it's just something as a fundamental thing as a taskbar and right-clicking and getting to my task manager and all of that, just really basic functionality. I just wish Microsoft could actually reintroduce that with Windows 11, right? So that's a user experience thing. The only other thing that I will bring up, and we've discussed this in great detail, Pete, and I know that you're making some moves in the back end with this. Yep, go.
Before you go there, just a reminder that if you right click the start menu on Windows 11, you do get Task Manager and Device Manager and all those kind of things. So that a lot of people don't realize that Power User menu is there.
That's a new introduction?
Nope, that's been there since Windows 10 actually.
No, I can't find it in Windows 11, standard Windows 11. Task Manager is not there on the right click. It's not there.
Right click on the start menu, the Windows logo.
Ah, right. Okay, sorry.
That's the and I'm doing air quotes. That's the Power User menu.
Right. Okay.
And it's got Event Viewer, Device Manager. I'm looking at it right now.
That's where they hit it. Right. Okay. Well, that's good. I just learned something.
Yep.
I just wish they'd put it back to where it was. That's all. With Windows 11. Apart from
you know what? Actually, I just right-clicked the taskbar because I never do that, and there's Task Manager.
When?
So that must have been done relatively recently.
Well, not on the builds. I've been using 22H2. Well, that's the latest build.
That's what I'm running here.
You got some development. Is that a development build?
Nope. This is a retail build. This is my box that I'm allowed to take screenshots on.
So I might have missed an update. Okay, well, it's good to know. It's good to know. Good. The other thing with Windows 11, which is a little bit deeper, is, and we've discovered this, is that there has been some changes in the performance power modes.
Yep.
And I hadn't even realised that there's another power submenu in Windows 11. I didn't even know it was there, Peter, because I always just go to the old legacy one, right? And the way that actually interacts with the legacy one is kind of weird, because if you don't have it on balance mode, you can't even access the secondary one. So I don't know what's going on there. I didn't even know it was there, Pete, to tell you the truth, because like I said, we're using performance and ultimate performance power profiles. So that was an interesting point. But what I was
it's a weird it is a weird part of the settings where, like, for 90% of the people out there, it makes perfect sense because it's trying to push towards a lower carbon footprint and lower battery usage and blah blah blah, like all those things that are important to a lot of people. But for folks who are trying to get the most out of their system power wise and don't care how much juice they suck out of the wall, then there are some extra hoops for sure.
Performance wise, you mean? Yeah, because power, you might be misconstrued as performance wise. Yeah. So, look, that's fair enough. I know that. But I think that there are some deeper changes, right? Because I was noticing, even with those high performance and then the ultimate performance modes in the advanced settings, I had to really double check that these things were sitting right. But the thing that is the point that we're going to make now, because we've discussed it and we are going to actually kind of speak about this publicly, is that very early on in my Windows 11 12th gen development, remember I was getting those crazy micro latencies in latency. Right. Crazy, not DPC latency, that was a little bit high, but there was all these crazy micro latencies that were just basically going off the graph, right? And we couldn't figure out what it was, and that actually stalled my 12th gen development quite a bit, right? And then I was sending all the data to the BIOS engineers and all the rest of it. They were great, and they just said, "Yep, confirmed. This is, but we don't know what it is, all right? Mm-hmm. And is it actually affecting overall performance?" And then I actually had to ignore the latency one stuff and did all the performance stuff and went, okay, whatever it is that it's actually reporting isn't directly affecting the DAW performance, and not that I could actually pick, right? But, and hindsight's an amazing thing. I still remember there was something going on with with the thread management within the DAWs. And like thinking back now, Pete was getting, and this is Pete over at Scan, he was getting some extra cores actually being threaded to when we were running some serial testing. And I'm thinking, that's not, how are you getting 4 and I'm only getting 2? And there was all of this kind of odd thing with, even in the serial testing, shouldn't even be running across multiple. Remember, it was load balancing. This is a whole other discussion we've had numerous times, right? But the number of actual cores that were getting hit was actually different between my machine and his, right? And I thought, well, how is that happening? And I just dug a little bit deeper, and discovered that Windows 11 does not unpark cores, right? So this has got something to do with their power management or whatever else. And so if you've got a high performance mode, this should automatically unpark all the cores. It doesn't, right? It literally doesn't. And so that was the difference that we were seeing. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And when I finally worked that out, and I had to drag out, some core parking applications that actually force unlocking all of the cores, unparking all of the cores. I haven't done that since 2008, Pete, just as a point. Mm-hmm. But Pete Kane over at Scan, that was part of his little grab bag. That's why there was a difference. He wasn't seeing those crazy micro latencies, and he wasn't seeing the cores remaining parked because he just had that in the background. So I finally pieced this together after 12 months that, Windows 11 is actually still parking cores. That's something I think, and I hope that you can actually talk to the relevant teams there.
Yeah. I need to talk to some kernel folks and find out why we do that. It is probably a power saving thing, but why would we do that and then have to use a third-party utility to unlock it? That doesn't make any sense.
It's real simple, right? Leave it on balanced. Leave the core parking on balanced because that's exactly where it's supposed to be, right? So, you're only going to be initiating cores when you need it, but then they still don't wake up. My issue is with the high performance and ultra performance modes, there's no way in the world you should be core parking. No way, right? Yeah. And I've been doing some remote service calls of late, just doing some Windows 10 updates for clients. And every single time I just sit there and fire up this core parking. And it's not a problem in Windows 10. It doesn't matter. We could go back to machines that were configured right at the start.
Right. And Windows 10 doesn't really understand the big little Intel stuff either. So it's kind of all part of the same package, I think.
Yes and no, because it's actually happening on the AMD machines as well, Pete.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
No. The core parking is also on the AMD machines, right? So this is inherent with the Windows 11 power profiling, right? I actually thought it was, at one point, just the just the 12th and 13th gen, big little, thread director. That's what I actually thought it was.
Right. I was thinking I would have thought it was thread director doing it, but apparently, no, yeah.
No. And again, that's probably my fault because I'm thinking I actually associated with thread director, but then I've had it confirmed that they're remaining parked on the AMD machines as well. I'm going, shit, it's not thread director. So that was, and I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't actually pass it on to you. Apologies if I didn't, because that was kind of that came in pretty late, right?
I'm learning it live with everybody else. It's all good.
Yeah. So there you go. Core parking, believe it or not, and I've actually passed it on to a couple of my colleagues that have been helping with the benchmarking and stuff on the forums, and they've been using 13900Ks quite successfully for 12 months or so, or 12th and 13th gen. And when I told them, they just said, "Shit, you won't believe it." Yeah, here we go. And I've immediately unlocked a couple of extra cores. Yep. So there you go. So that's something I think, Pete, that we can look into.
Yep. And free tip for the listeners there. So unpark your cores if you're on later gen.
Yeah, unpark the cores. Now, I remember when I first discovered, I was in two minds whether we should share that, but I think it is worth sharing. I mean, that's something that everyone can benefit from. So that's
not the kind of thing to keep to yourself.
No. So we'll kind of pass that on. So apart from that, the only significant problems that I have, not significant, but the only qualms I still have is that user experience with Windows 11. Right, and it's more than just a right-click taskbar. It's just kind of, it's just a really odd kind of shift. I won't say Windows 8, all right, because that was a titanic shift in the wrong direction. But I will say I'm not the only one that has voiced disapprovals of the direction that they took. And I'm hoping that someone's listening. I mean, it's not that difficult to actually return like a smaller, thinner taskbar. I mean, how hard is that, Pete? Give me a smaller, thinner taskbar. It's this big, fat, bloody, it's just, I mean, it's small and it's a visual thing, but it just comes down to a user experience for me. So, it's not going anywhere, so it's just something that I'm going to have to deal with as we move forward. And it's nice to know that they've actually returned some of that menu so they have been listening, obviously.
Yeah, so there's some stuff there, but I know like people still want to be able to dock their taskbar in different places, and there's a lot of other stuff that I hear all the time, and I couldn't give you any insight into why that's not happening, but yeah.
Look, I just find some of the user experience stuff really odd, I mean, the reason that OS X, I could jump on an OS X machine. I haven't been on one for maybe 3 years or so. Let me tell you, nothing's changed, or 5 years, or even 10 years apart. I can jump on an OS X machine and the actual navigation and the UI is, the user experience is exactly the same, right? Now, that's better the devil you know. And I do that with my Linux machines as well, which is a little bit more customizable. But I don't think, the whole idea of actually shifting that user experience, I don't know what kind of feedback they were getting that they felt that was needed, but that was not one that I would have, not a direction that I would have gone in, put it that way, Anyway, we're getting close to the end. In the trenches, this is the typical, any product support stuff. So I'm going to throw this over to Chris if he's had any interesting product support stories that he would like to share from the last, 6 months.
Not really. Not any specific one. I mean, I can tell you that there's a lot of people going back to some of their older stuff and trying to get some of the things that they may have put to the side working again. Whether that's just a sign of economic times or not. We're certainly getting more older stuff working for people. But it's just been very consistent, a lot of that kind of stuff. Nothing memorable, so I don't really have a lot to add here. Hasn't been any ones where I've been, oh, that's a bit weird.
Okay.
It's been just consistently busy.
Okay. Well, I got a few. And we'll start off with Waves and their misstep. We'll call it a misstep, where they announced that they were going to stop perpetual licenses. They're going to force everyone to a subscription. Now, I know we've discussed the subscriptions, and I don't have a problem with subscriptions. If people want to go that way, that's fine, right? But you can't go throwing out the baby with the bathwater, ending all perpetual licensing, and then go, it's going to be subscription only or nothing, right? Now, I don't know if you followed any of that, but the blowback was massive. I mean, massive. And, people were, they were creating threads about, Waves alternative plugins, and they're dropping all the Waves. It was quite savage. And they backpedaled, and they returned the perpetual licensing as well. I mean, look, it's just on a personal level. I don't own a lot of Wave stuff. I've got about 4 or 5 plugins, right? And I'll keep them up to date. That's fine. But you're not going to force me onto a subscription with another 20 plugins that I won't use, or 10 whatever the minimum was, right? It's just no point for me to go there, right? So, I was actually weighing up, am I going to just sit there and dump all of them? And I was close to, but I just thought, no, they've actually pulled back on it and restored the perpetual licensing. So I'm kind of back to where I was. So that was kind of cool.
I will say, Vin, one place where I would expect to start seeing more moves to subscriptions is as we see more AI integrated in, because a lot of AI processing has to happen in the cloud for various reasons, and that costs money.
Yeah.
And so these plugin developers, as they start integrating AI, that's beyond the stuff that runs today as like very small bits of processing on the client, I think we're going to start seeing subscriptions there. I just hope it's managed well.
Yeah. Oh, look, again, I don't have a problem with subscription. If a person wants to go to a subscription model, and there's a lot of very successful ones, right? Presonus have got one, as Chris had mentioned, and Waves has got a very good one. Not Waves, sorry, East West. And look, I think the majority of people are going to go there for those people that want it. I just don't agree with killing off the perpetual license.
Yeah.
That was the thing that bit Waves on the arse big time, because there's people that have got thousands of dollars in perpetual licensing that were then going to not lose, but they lost the ability to update it any further. And eventually those things were going to stop, and they had no option but to go. So that was a big blowback.
It's just badly managed. I mean, I got an email from UVI last week saying, we understand you own a lot of our collection already and may not want to go to our subscription model. So here's a voucher based on what we think you already owe to be able to collect the rest of the stuff. And I kind of went, that's really cool.
Hang on, are they ending perpetual as well?
No, they're not ending perpetual, but they have subscription.
Right.
The thing is that when you own so much of it, the subscription doesn't make any sense because you already own it. So, I own so much of UVI that I'm not going to sign the subscription model because it's just not worth it.
Yep.
But there's an acknowledgement there from them to say, well, we do understand you own quite a lot of it already. So here are some discounted vouchers for you to buy whatever else you want. And I think that's an example of managing subscription really well.
Yeah. Oh, look, again, there are some really good models. There's some not so good models. But it was good that Waves actually reversed that decision. And look, and let's remember that Avid was probably one of the biggest ones that did it initially, right? Now, they reversed that, Chris? I didn't. They reversed it without even telling us, right? So they went, that's it, perpetual licenses are gone. I'm at a dealer level, right? All perpetual licenses are gone, right? Then they went, oh, hang on, there's a bigger backlash. Perpetual licenses are back. They didn't even send the dealers an official note to say, hey, perpetual licenses are back.
I think they might have upset all the schools.
Well, I'm thinking, what the? Because one of my close friends, he says, oh, I've just updated my my Pro Tools. I said, oh yeah, cool. Did you go to subscription? He goes, no, perpetual license. And what the hell are you talking about? He goes, perpetual licenses are back, Vin. I've gone, what? And then I had to kind of dig through and went, and I'm looking through all of my emails, right, for my official Avid, account. Nothing. And I've gone, yeah, thanks, guys. That was awesome. Mind you, that was probably in the period where I was, navigating my medical adventure as well. So I wasn't exactly focused on whether Avid had returned subscriptions or not. I probably would have picked it up, but I didn't pick it up at that point.
Another one that got bit in the ass recently was Bitwig. Remember, they had a subscription model, but then they tried to add on something for an additional cost. And just that didn't meet the expectations of everybody. Like it was a legitimate thing to add on something, but just the expectations they set before that didn't jive with what they tried to do, and everybody lost it.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact thing was the exact detail there, but I do remember there was a bit of pushback. But I've got one that you guys probably not aware of this company, but it's bigger than I've actually realized, but it was a company called Acusonus. Now, this is a Greek company that also had offices in the United States, and they had a really cool AI-powered restoration suite that I'd purchased, and I was actually a dealer for Acusonus as well, right? It was part of my software list, and they were cool little plugins. They were kind of like these one knob type of things, they just worked, right? And because they were AI, they didn't cause a lot of artifact and stuff. They're not as good as the Acon Digital stuff, but they were way before the Acon Digital stuff. And I was quite happy using them, right? Now, rebuilding my development machine, which now has become my production machine for my podcast, I'm kind of transferring all my plugins across, and I've gone, where's my Acusonus installers? And I couldn't find them. I went, I'll just go to the website to download them, right? website's gone. Domain's gone, right? I've gone, right. That's weird. Bit of a search. Wait for this one, right? Again, this is during my recovery. And I wasn't paying 100% attention, and there was no email. I will reiterate, no email, right, to say they were doing this. Acusonus were acquired by Meta, right? And in the vicinity of 70 to 100 million euros, somewhere in that vicinity. So the boys are cashed up. Awesome, right? What Meta are doing with it, I don't know, right? But they bought the company. They shut down the website, the download servers, and the activation servers. So even if I had my installers, I couldn't reactivate these plugins that I bought.
Boy, I hate that.
All right? They have completely disappeared. There is no contact point. The website is gone. I mean, what the fuck, guys? Seriously, I'm swearing, because that is one of the most despicable things that I have encountered in recent stuff. I mean, you can't do that to your end users. Now, these guys have been around for, I don't know, a good 10, 15 years, and there was a whole stack of tools, not only of the restoration stuff, there was a whole stack of tools, little sequences and drum kind of loop manipulation stuff. They were really widely used in the electronic, the EDM community. Everyone got shafted, right? No warning, bang, pulled the plug. What do? You can't do anything. They're sitting there living in the Bahamas now, right? You know, it's like counting their bloody euros, right? Meta are sitting on the IP. I don't understand. Why would they need to shut down the company? Okay, so they've been acquired by Meta, right?
Meta must have wanted a specific piece of IP or a specific set of developers, and they didn't care about any of the rest. I've seen that happen a lot before, where they want one little thing, so they buy the company, kill everything else, and they've got that. I'm not saying I know of other large companies which have done something like that, but I do happen to know of a large company that's done that.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Okay, you bought the IP, right? You've bought the IP. Yeah. Why destroy that whole user base?
Because they don't want the user base. You know, it's a horrible thing, but that's not what they wanted in the purchase. They were very focused on this bit of IP and screw everything else.
Well, they could have just left the download servers there and
there's a cost to that.
Oh, damn.
I kind of understand. I don't like it, but I understand how Meta could have done something like this. They want a specific thing. The only way to get it's to buy the company, so they buy the company and kill everything else.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's my main what the fuck gripe, right? That was bad. And you know, everyone's losing their minds over bloody waves. I've gone, oh mate, you kidding me? I got one better than that one. All right.
Yep.
So on my old production machine, I've still got these plugins, but on the new one, and I actually used them in one of my final production templates. Gone. See you later. Right. Never again. And I just thought that was a low blow. And but here's the best one. This is what I missed. All right. Apparently, anyone that owned any of the production suite, the restoration suite, they were offering an update to the latest one for free. All right, for a couple of week period, and then they just, without warning, pulled everything.
There was I forget what it was, but there was a synthesizer I used for a really long time, a VST.
Yeah. No, and Apple bought it.
Apple bottom, right?
Yeah.
What the hell was that? Yeah, I forget. But they bought
a sample-based thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a fantastic synth. I loved it for a long time. But Apple bottom, and what they at least did was you could download like all the assets and stuff for a couple of weeks before they took it offline. And I like that was a better way to do it. And at least they didn't have online activation and everything, which I still didn't like that they immediately terminated the Windows part, but at least they didn't just completely pull everything out from under it.
Yeah. I got one better for the story on that exact synth, and the name will come to me probably after we finish recording the show, right? I had built some development machines for one of the developers who lived in Australia, right? And I built an Intel and AMD machine back in the day. And
Camel Audio.
Yeah, Camel Audio.
Alchemy.
That's
Camel Audio Alchemy. That's
100%. Beautiful. Absolutely awesome synth. And because I helped them out with some development machines, they gave me some NFRs, right? So they gave me some not for resale copies, right? That's what NFR stands for, and that's kind of pretty common, in the and I was actually selling the software on my website and stuff, and everything's cool, and then I get this email, right, and they're just saying, Vin, due to some I can't remember how they worded it, but they just said, we need you to remove all copies of your software and destroy every backup of every sample library and copy that you got. I've gone, what are you talking about? Look, we can't go into detail just yet, but all the NFR programs are actually ended, but we need some proof that you've actually removed it and destroyed the product. I'm going, well, seriously, I said, how the fuck am I going to prove that? What?
Right.
How ridiculous, right? I just said, look, I will abide by it, what you've requested. I've removed all of the software, and if I've removed the software, then it's no use to me. So I have deleted it just out of due respect, right? But how am I going to show you any evidence of that? It's just ridiculous, all right? And I'm like, what the hell was all that about? Right? I'm thinking, have I said something, or what? I haven't even.
That's right. Vin, we don't like you anymore.
Yeah, it was like, what the hell? I haven't mentioned anything. What the hell was all that about, right? And then a couple of weeks later, it was announced that Apple had bought them. But that was bizarre.
Yeah,
mate. Remove all and destroy all instances. What?
Send him a picture of burning floppy disks or something like that.
It's
all gone.
Fucking crazy. Yeah, so there you go. Look, the only other one, real quickly, and it's not a major thing, but this is with my. Actually, no, I've got two more real quick, right? So NI have got a new native access, right? Well, it looks all cool. They've made a few changes, a couple of things that they've regressed. Where before you could install anything, it would always ask you, are you sure this is exactly where you want to install it? This is something that they added later because too many people were actually just following the prompt, right, and installing sound libraries where they shouldn't be, right? They've returned to that. That's one, right? So you have to be very diligent and make sure that before you actually download anything, you've got to set all your directory paths. Not a biggie, right?
Yep.
But here's the one that I dislike, all right, is that I'm configuring some machines and I've got my task manager up because I was doing some benchmarking stuff and then I left the task manager up, with all the CPU logical cores showing, and I was out of the DAW, but I had native access running and it pegged the core, all right? I'm thinking, wow, that's bizarre. But it's arbitrating in the back end, it's doing all these handshakes and stuff. So it physically took a core, complete core, right? Completely locked out a core. Fine, all right? So I finished all the downloading and stuff, and I shut down native access, and guess what? The core didn't get released. So this thing is still locked. I'm thinking, oh, come on, it can't be. So I call up, all the process management stuff. Sure enough, this thing was still taking whatever that percentage was. Native access, even shut down completely, was not releasing the core. Now, you either had to do one or two things. One, you had to restart the machine, or two, you had to go into the process manager and actually physically shut the process down. All right?
Yeah, so the process hung. Yep.
Mate, I actually passed that on to Pete, and he's swearing like a trooper in the messenger. Well, this is Pete Kane, because he says, you know what, I had a client that was bitching about a stuck core a couple of days ago. We couldn't work it out. I said, is he a Native Instruments user? He goes, most likely. I went, can you just double check that he didn't have this thing running in the back? Yeah, sure enough, right? I mean, to me, that's just bad. Look, coming from a non-code guy to a code guy, I mean, but how do you miss that?
It depends on. So first of all, yeah, bugs are bad. People should fix it and have enough testing for it. But it could be something specific to that configuration on that machine, and that's the case when the NI app crashes something in the background that never gets shut down. Or
but it's not crashing, but it's running. It's running perfectly.
If you shut down the app and it still shows up in the process manager, it's crashed.
That means it crashes 100% of the times on every machine that we tested on.
Yeah, so that sucks. I don't know. I've never had that happen here, but I haven't run it in a while, so who knows?
No, it's the new one. It's the new one. When was the last time you updated it?
Probably a year ago.
No, new one. It's the new one.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if you can, have a whisper to someone at NI, that might be good. And the last one, just real quickly, and it stems back on these, these download managers and all the rest of it, is the Steinberg one, which I've had a reasonable bitch about in the past. But again, I was doing a remote service call with a client that had done an update, and while I'm there, I'm re-optimizing everything, and I'm just checking, what is landed where, and I've gone, why is your C drive almost exploding? Because I don't know. What do you mean? I went, mate, this thing's about to stop dead. So, I've got a little thing called Tree Size Free, which is a great little app, and what it does, it just sits there and scans the drives, and then just shows you which directories are taking up all the space. And we discovered that he'd been buying a whole stack of Steinberg additional content, right? It had all been landing on the C. I've gone, you do know that you've got multiple drives here? He goes, yeah. He goes, but I just would have thought it would have just put it where all the rest of the library was. I'm going, well, it ain't that smart, right? And this is this is my qualm, right? So the Steinberg one, again, I'm going to keep reiterating this, that whoever's coding it, I don't think they're actually using it, right? Or they're working on the lowest common denominator, which is a laptop with one drive, and they're just going, oh, yeah, look, it's all working, right? No. Yeah. So we went through, and I was like remotely just sitting there moving all this stuff. I just said, mate, this is going to cost you a fortune. You just do it, all right? And then it was kind of funny. He said to me, he goes, you know what, Vin? He goes, the new machine? I said, what, the one that's a couple of months old? He goes, yep, because this is on the laptop. He goes, I think I've done the same thing. I've gone, you know what to do? But this is the type of cleanup stuff, people just don't realize it's just going on in the background. It's just sitting there dumping all of their stuff onto their bloody primary drive, right? And the only time they really get an inkling of it is if the drive fills up,
And people shouldn't have to think about that. They should be told.
Yeah.
Like most smart applications will tell you something like, hey, you've got this much space free on these 3 places. Where do you want to put it?
Yeah.
Instead of just dumping everything.
And it's not uncommon, because I had another client who was just saying to me, he goes, hey, Vin, I need to upgrade the C. I filled up the 500 gigabyte C drive. I said, on an audio machine, what are you doing? Are you installing, you must be accidentally installing libraries or something on there. Nah. Yep, sure enough. He just ran it, and he's swearing, going, I had no idea. I went, these download managers just assume that you're a single lowest common denominator, single drive. So look,
even the VST standard, like for VST3s, it's got to be in the program files, common files, VST3 or whatever.
Yeah.
And unless you're going to go and set every other application to go look in a different place. And so even that standard doesn't take into account the fact that there could be multiple drives on a machine. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same way where it wants to give you the VST2 version, the 3 version, the AAX. I mean, it should be asking you which one of those 10 versions do you actually want, because you only end up using one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, look, most installers have always got that selection type of stuff, except for Waves. Waves doesn't even ask you. It doesn't even ask you where you're going to put it. I'm just going to put it here. Thanks. Okay.
Right.
All right. Yeah.
And a lot of those download managers now, you have to kind of go out of your way to say where you want to put things, where it's not just walking through a wizard during the install that asks you each thing, like, do you want these? And where do you want to put this? Now you got to know to go in some download manager settings to say, here's the drive for this kind of stuff. And like, musicians don't need that. Like, just be smart about it.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point of why NI have regressed, because the initial download manager, the native access, would I was getting clients piling stuff onto the C. Then they made the change, right? That before you download, they said, "Poop," and up come the little menu, and you said, "Please check where all of these directories are." I'm going, thankfully they did that. They listened, they did it. And now it comes a new one, and they've regressed. They've gone, right, now I've got to go chasing, right? And that's okay. I know a lot of clients don't. And then we have the hanging, I'm hanging on to the core, thanks very much. So I don't know. Anyway, but I think that pretty much sums it up, guys, unless there's anything else that you would like to talk about.
You know what's interesting, Vin, on that? Because somebody's going to say, well, Mac doesn't have this problem and Linux doesn't have this problem. And I can tell you why they don't, because they map drives to different, basically subdirectories. But you can do the same thing on Windows if you decided to. You don't have to have a D drive. You can mount your second drive there as a subdirectory on your primary drive through the disk management.
Yeah, drive pooling type of stuff. Yeah,
it's not even the drive pooling. It's just the way that the drives are accessed. It's something that if you're running NTFS or REFS or whatever, you can do that. Yeah, and that's something nobody uses because it's kind of weird and it's not the way PCs have always worked. But it might be something to explore more in the future where, that subdirectory is your VST folder or that subdirectory is something else, and just set things up that way.
Well, look, where I've seen some people do that setup, I don't do it, but some people do that setup where, say they've got 3 sample drives, right? 3 sample drives, and then they'll pool them, right? That 3 into one volume, and then then they'll just have one letter for all of the sample drives, right? So that I can see how that works. I've got a drive
a little bit different, but same general idea.
Yeah, I've got a drive pool application. It's a third-party thing called DriveBender, which I've been using for years. This is on my media server, and I've just got 4 NAS spec hard drives, right? That are all pulled together into one large volume, and that kind of works for me, So that's that one. I just
it just needs to be simple. I keep most of my VSTs on my C drive, but anything that's a library goes on an external drive, and you just need to be able to put the gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of stuff somewhere else. But leave your core DLL VST where it needs to be.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, that is, always been my primary configuration, is that I don't move the DLLs off the C drive. That is always in their primary and default positioning, right? It's just the libraries just need to move off, and I don't know. I just keep coming back to whoever's actually coding this stuff. I don't think a lot of them use it, because they couldn't possibly use it, or lowest common denominator. Oh, I'm coding on a laptop. There you go. I'm going to put it here. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I reckon, is that it, guys? Are we?
Yeah, that might be a wrap.
I think that might be a wrap. All right. Pete, you got anything else?
No, it's nice to get back into it. I know this was a long episode, but we had a lot to talk about since the last time.
Well, it's another one of those recovery, not recovery. It's another one of those comeback episodes, and I didn't think it was going to go 3 hours, but it's just gone over 3 hours, so it's going to be around that 3 hour mark again.
You were pretty certain it wasn't going to go over 2.5.
I do believe before we started recording, Vin, we gave you some shit about this, and we're like, well, as long as Vin doesn't talk forever, we can keep this nice and short. But I
thought I tightened this up a fair bit, and oh, come on, hey, 3 hours, Chris, what were you predicting when you saw the run sheet?
I said no way for 2.5.
No, what did you say last night? What did you say to you? You messaged me, you going, mate, it's going to go 5 hours.
I wasn't far off.
Finn, this is not a win. No, but seriously, this was all really good and worth the 3 hours of time, but we need to give you a hard time about
I know,
talking on and on about these things.
But I mean, we're only doing these TechBytes shows once every 6 months. Maybe we'll do a 3-month one, right?
Maybe we'll do an Intel free one.
Yeah, we'll do an Intel.
Yeah. There are 2 hours of Intel stuff here in the middle.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. Well, look, we're doing in between.
Well deserved, though.
Maybe that's an hour and a half. You know. Anyway, guys.
Chris, you want to take bets?
Yep. Pretty safe bet.
Good one. All right. Well, we'll just see. Maybe we'll do a a Q3 roundup instead of the half yearly roundup. We'll see how we go. All right, guys. That's been awesome as per usual. Thank you again for your time and energy. And I think on that note, on to the next.